Ladies and gentlemen, the hour is now 5:30 p.m. We have just concluded a 30-minute period allotted for a public input session as it pertains to the budget. If anyone had questions, concerns, or suggestions with regard to the Richland 2 budget, that time period has expired, and as such, we will entertain a motion at this time to enter into executive session.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Secretary.
I move that we recess public session and convene an executive session for the purpose of a discussion of student expulsions, student appeals, and student admission requests to the district's adult education program and a contractual matter regarding cell phone tower.
Thank you, Mr. Shadd. Is there a second? Thank you, Dr. Caution Parker. It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion regarding said motion? Hearing none, we'll call the question at this time. By a vote of 7-0, the motion unanimously carries, and we will enter into executive session. Good evening. We have just returned from executive session where we discussed student appeals, student admission requests into the request singular into the district's adult education program, a contractual matter regarding cell phone tower, and we are now resuming public session for our Tuesday, May 14th, 2019 school board meeting. Thank you all for being with us this evening. At this time, we will start our meeting with an inspirational moment and the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mr. Keith Price, who's one of our assistant superintendents over Millen High Schools, formerly principal at Blythewood High School, has been with the district for quite some time. We're happy to have you here this evening, and it's always a pleasure when we've got executive staff members or principals or teachers who work with the district to be able to render an inspirational moment to us, and we appreciate you being here, Mr. Well, you got to be here. But thank you for giving us the inspirational moment this evening.
Sure thing.
Mr. Price.
Thank you for the invitation. Good evening, Madam Chair, Dr. Davis, and ladies and gentlemen of the board. In a 1998 interview with Educational Leadership, Rabbi Harold Kushner noted a pattern among successful people who overcame obstacles in their lives. When asked, "How did you get to be who you are?" Kushner said, "The answer will always begin with the same 4 words. There was this teacher." As children enter school, the adults there become a part of their web of support. There was this teacher can become a crucial part of the story adolescents tell about themselves. The influence of teacher-student relationships on learning is well documented. The effect size of positive relationships on achievement, which is the statistically calculated strength of the effect this factor has on student learning, is 0.53, which is above the 0.40 average effect size associated with a year's worth of growth for a year in school. In other words, these relationships can accelerate learning. For adolescents who regularly encounter a dozen or more different adults across their school day, these relationships extend both in and out of the classroom. Positive teacher-student relationships shouldn't be confused with friendships. Adolescent peer friendships are essential, but we aren't their peers. Students need something different from us. Markers of strong teacher-student relationships include, number 1, relatedness, showing interest in the student's life. Number 2, structure, creating fair and consistent expectations and rules that govern school and classroom interactions. Students will never admit it, but they crave structure. Number 3, autonomy, providing choice and opportunities to make decisions that matter. Number 4, optimism, infusing into communications with students our belief in them as capable learners and as people. And number 5, emotional support, acknowledging feelings and assisting students in processing their emotions. Warmth and personal regard are crucial, but not sufficient enough. Teachers are more like warm demanders, insistent about performance and effort. Warm demanders are teachers who communicate to students that acting with mutual respect and perseverance is non-negotiable, while also providing positive supports. While they use humor and warmth in their interactions, warm demanders are clear about their expectations. That uniform insistence on excellence is a form of academic press that can permeate a school. By investing in relationships in an intentional way, we ensure that each student understands that he or she is able and valuable. In the Richland 2 strategic plan, there are 3 levels that we focus on. While achievement is the pinnacle followed closely by the development of talent, the foundation of the pyramid is strongly supported by culture and environment, which is fueled primarily by relationships. Richland 2 is flush with teachers who do so much more than teach content. They love our students. They care for their students. They push their students. They celebrate with their students. They cry with their students. They remember their students. And they influence their students. As a Richland 2 teacher and administrator, I've seen this in multiple schools and the impact it has when a school is made up of teachers and staff who invest in students. As a parent of 4 Richland 2 students, I have seen others care for my girls the way their mother and I do at home. With 2 Richland 2 graduates, I've even watched how those relationships extend long after their K-12 days are over. This not only includes their high school teachers, but their early childhood ones as well. And it also includes staff, coaches, and counselors. Richland 2 is blessed to have so many people in so many positions that invest in relationships, and this is why our students continue to reap the harvest that is built with them. When so many people are giving their best effort to help find success for every student, this is what yields premier results. This is what being premier is all about. I enjoy reading books by John Gordon, and some of his titles include The Carpenter, You Win First in the Locker Room, Seed, and The Energy Bus. And one of his quotes is, "Love the process, and you'll love what the process produces." As we reflect back on a week of recognizing teachers and thanking them, please allow me to conclude by thanking all of those warm demanders out there who continue to push and to pull and to connect and to love our students. You make a difference every day, and we are premier because of you, and we couldn't be premier without you. In fact, we can say that we are premier because there were these teachers. Please join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Price. I think you have summed up coming off of teacher appreciation, not coming off of, because we appreciate teachers all the time, but the official recognition of Teacher Appreciation Week. I know as we experienced the Teacher of the Year Gala and attended Richland 2's Teacher of the Year celebrations, there were so many stories of those teachers having been that teacher. So we appreciate your inspirational moment this evening. Without further ado, we will move to item 4.1, approval of our current agenda. If we could get a motion, please. A motion for approval of the same.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Manning.
I move to approve the agenda for the May 14th, 2019 board meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Manning. Is there a second? Thank you, Dr. Caution Parker. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question at this time. By a vote of 7-0, the motion unanimously carries. And moving right along to item 5.1, special recognitions, Dr. Davis.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair, members of the board, we have before us this evening Miss Libby Ruth to share with us the special recognitions for the May 14th, 2019 board meeting. Ms. Ruth.
Thank you, Dr. Davis, Chair Mackey, and members of the board. We appreciate those with us tonight to help us praise our students, teachers, and schools. So let's get right to it with some first place winners from the FBLA State Conference. If you'll come forward, Kalina Green. Thank you, Ms. Mackey. Reagan Hannibal and Sydney Hannibal are our students, and if their advisors would come forward, Sheila Jones, Monica Lawton, and Principal Jeff Timoni. So these students participate in the Future Business Leaders of America organization, and they are first place winners at the organization's state conference. FBLA prides itself on the development of young people in business or other career-related fields. Students participate in various competitive events to strengthen and hone their business skills. Kalina, where's Kalina? Right here, won first place in the organizational leadership competition. Reagan won the top award in Introduction to Parliamentary Procedures, and Sydney took top honors in the Help Desk competition. These first place winners now move on to the National FBLA Leadership Conference in San Antonio in late June. We congratulate you on your successes so far and wish you great luck in the Nationals. Congratulations. Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to ask Kathy Carroll from Westwood High School to come forward, and her principal, Dr. Cheryl Guy, will join her. We're very proud to share that Miss Carroll, the lead librarian at Westwood, has been elected as the 2020-2021 president of the American Association of School Librarians, which is a division of the American Library Association. This 2-year commitment comes with a host of responsibilities, including a seat on the association's executive board. Undoubtedly, Ms. Carroll earned this position thanks to her tireless dedication to the American Library Association. Her volunteer work includes serving as a counselor at large and as a site visit team member for the Accreditation Council. She says she is deeply honored to be entrusted to lead the organization at such a pivotal time in the profession and looks forward to having conversations and implementing policies that will impact the profession for years to come. Congratulations, and thank you for your dedication. Dr. Guy, you want to turn around? No. And if your student council advisor, Jennifer Callahan, is here. Now we get to congratulate Dr. Guy for being named, and let me switch my, oh, no, thank you. The Administrator of the Year by the South Carolina Association of Student Councils. Ever since Westwood opened its doors, the Student Council has been a strong force within the school and statewide. One of the reasons is the support from Dr. Guy and her administrative team. Support like hosting an annual breakfast for student government, participating in dress-up days, no matter how interesting they may be, speaking at pep rallies, as well as always welcoming students in your office. Dr. Guy, we congratulate you on this well-deserved honor, but most importantly, thank you for all the dedication you give to your student leaders. Congratulations. Now I'd like to ask Karis Mazik principal at Blythewood Middle School, although this whole week I was telling everybody she was principal at Westwood. I don't know why, but I fixed that. She has been elected to the board of the South Carolina Association for Middle Level Education. As a board member, she will help identify and promote best practices in middle level education and engage all parties responsible for meeting the unique, and they truly are unique, needs of our young adolescent. The organization serves as an advocate for quality middle level education, promotes public awareness, and creates support and provides quality member services. We know that you will be a great asset to this important board. Congratulations, and thanks for all that you do for middle schools here as well across the state. Congratulations. And I believe if you just want to stay right there, because we are now moving on to recognition of our National Beta Club Schools of Merit. Now, I believe your Beta Club advisors couldn't be with you, but I will say that they are Christy Milikangas, I had it right before the meeting, and Vida Marie Nicholson. We also have Dent Middle School, so with Tamla Ashford, the principal there, and Beta Club advisors Dr. Lorraine Jackman and Mark Turner. Come on up. And also Muller Road Middle, which is Principal Sean Bishton, and his advisors are Ms. Trafina Cuffey. I do not believe Mr. Kuhn could make it, or Ms. Manchester. So Blythewood, Dent, and Muller Road Middle Schools have all been named Beta Club Schools of Merit. Schools earn this distinction by demonstrating an increase in membership. But really, it's not about increasing the numbers. It's about increasing the students who are exposed to a pathway that provides improved academic performance and character development. The National Beta Club is the largest independent nonprofit educational youth organization in America, and you all are now very proud, distinguished parts of that group. Congratulations.
I might have to get a new camera after this tie is taken.
Congratulations. Mr. Bishton, you can stay up there. Because now we're going to recognize your school for your AVID Award. And I will bring up your AVID leads, which is Brandy Ross, your outgoing teacher of the year, I might also add. And Assistant Principal Lakeisha Cook was trying to make it, but it could not be here. Muller Road Middle School has been named an AVID School-Wide Site of Distinction, and I believe this is at least the second year, and this one's in a row. AVID, which stands for Advancement Via Individual Determination, fosters a safe, open culture, high expectations for teachers and students, and collaboration in all classrooms. As a school-wide site of distinction, Muller Road Middle demonstrates the highest level of AVID implementation fidelity. The honor recognizes the schools and teachers for demonstrating excellence in instructional practice and promotion of college readiness school-wide. Muller Road Middle excels at implementing AVID strategies and cultivating a college-ready culture. The school has offered exposure to PSAT for 7th graders. The PTO paid for all 8th graders interested to take the PSAT, and the school has provided increased access to higher-level courses for its students. Congratulations on this honor, but more importantly, thank you for what you do for our students. For our last recognition, hold on a second, Ms. Mackey. Thank you. I actually get to turn the microphone over to Mr. Mike King with the State Department of Education, and I'm going to call up from our W.R. Rogers Center, Mr. Bobby Cunningham and Ms. Carla Derrick Cheney, our college and career navigator there, for a special presentation. Mr. King, the podium is all yours.
All right. Good evening, and thank you for allowing me time on the agenda tonight. Wanted to start by saying, coming to recognize Mr. Cunningham, who is the Adult Education Director. A couple of things about the Adult Ed program here in Richland, too. They operate as one of our training hubs. Adult Education has 55 providers across the state. We have the state divided in 4 regions, and Richland 2 School District Adult Education Program is one of our training hubs, and we definitely appreciate all of the effort, all of the training that occurs here in Richland School District 2. Last school year, there were 613 high school diplomas awarded across the state. And we recognize that our annual Celebrating Success Luncheon programs that actually led that effort or lead those efforts. We omitted recognizing Richland School District 2 Adult Education. We recognized 4 programs each school year. Richland 2 should have been one of the 4 that we recognized. We actually had our numbers wrong, and I'm here tonight to correct that error. Actually, Richland School District 2 had 43 high school diplomas that were awarded last school year, and we definitely appreciate those efforts and all of the efforts that you do as far as adult education is concerned. So I recognized Mr. Cunningham last week at our end-of-year directors meeting, but I want to officially recognize him tonight with the award.
Thank you, Mr. King. And that concludes our recognitions tonight, board members. Thank you very much.
Allow a few seconds for the room to clear a bit. Congratulations to all of our award recipients this evening. Moving right along this evening to item 6 on our agenda, approval of our consent agenda. If we could get a motion to approve the same at this time.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Agostini.
I move to approve the consent agenda for May 14th, 2019.
Thank you, Mrs. Agostini. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shad. It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion at this time? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The pop-ups are moving very quickly this evening, Mrs. Sherman. By a vote of 7-0, the motion carries unanimously. At this time, we'll move on to item 7 of our agenda, specifically item 7.1, school focus, ironically, W.R. Rogers Center. Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, members of the board, we will have before you this evening the school focus from W.R. Rogers, and I believe we have Mr. Bobby Cunningham. Mr. Cunningham.
Good evening, Madam Chair.
Good evening.
Dr. Davis and fellow board members. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you some updates from W.R. Rogers and what's happening out on that side of the two-notch road. Nothing's changed from our services. We still offer the same community-based services that we've always offered. But what has changed with W.R. Rogers is our focus. Previously, we were focused on getting credentials. High school credentials, GEDs, high school equivalency, credentials. But now we have shifted, as have all adult programs in South Carolina, we have now shifted our focus to integrated education and training. In short, we are now trying to get folks jobs. We're trying to get them not only a credential, but a career pathway that's going to lead to a better life. When they come to us, we hear them say, I want a GED, or I want a high school diploma. But once we get to know them, we really understand that they're saying to us they want a better life and they want a better future. And through these services, we provide them. As you see, we provide, again, high school diploma services, equivalency diploma, AccuPlacer testing for technical school placement. I would add that our new career and college navigator this year has already placed 42 adult ed students into Midlands Technical College, and that's enough to be proud of, and we are proud of it. We do ASVAB testing, computer literacy. We're also one of the leaders in CompTIA testing, that is A++ testing, and we have lots of folks who come to us from Shaw Air Force Base and Fort Jackson who are trying to seek these certifications. We also do basic skills, ACT and WinKeys testing. We're a South Carolina Benefits Bank, which is a component of SC Thrive. That service brings community services to the community at our site to include Medicaid, to include tax preparation, to include any of the services that social service agencies provide. They can come to W.R. Rogers, get signed up, and get qualified at that site. But one of the services not listed up there is the services I want to talk a little bit more about, and that is integrated education and training. Through the efforts of Dr. Bakutis and one of our staff members, Sharon James, W.R. Rogers has secured a $100,000 work-based learning grant, and it is going to serve as the basis and the rock of our development of integrated education and training. Here's some of the components of that grant. We're going to have 30 students who will be identified as having some barrier to either education or to a life in general. And we're going to take those 30 students, and we've already identified 30 internships for those students. And those students will go through 48 hours or 3 weeks of training in preparation for the workforce. And once we have them prepared, then they will go to the job. And since our sector strategy involves advanced manufacturing, they will be placed in advanced manufacturing jobs through October 31st. The grant pays them a minimum stipend of $450 a month for about 15 to 20 hours a week. And hopefully coming out of that, they will have the work-based experience to make a decision as to whether advanced manufacturing is good for them, bad for them, or whether they want to stay in that field or not. We've also, as Mike has already identified, one of 4 technical assistance hubs in South Carolina. I would argue that we're the premier hub because we're centrally located partly, and most people come here because of the facilities that you have so graciously supported us with. As already has been mentioned, the 43 diplomas awarded last year was the highest number for our division in South Carolina. And I would also add that Richland 2 Adult Education has the 9th largest adult ed program in South Carolina. 7 years ago, we had 231 students, and we were ranked in the bottom 10. Now we're ranked in the top 10. And the last achievement that I want to bring to your attention is the United Way Gold Award. And that award speaks for who we are, because we have a culture at W.R. Rogers, a nurturing culture. But more than a nurturing culture, we have a culture of giving. And we pride ourselves in what we give to our students and to our community. Some of our achievements are as follows. Thus far in 2018-19, we have already awarded 26 high school equivalency diplomas. You might know them as GEDs. Last year, we won the award with 43 high school diplomas. Thus far, we have 57. We feel like we'll be up here again next year. We have 74 bronze certificates, 53 silver, and 4 gold certificates. We set goals at the beginning of the year, and we're fastly approaching those goals. We have 83 of the 90 needed to reach our goal in the number that were on high school credentials. Of the 200, we now have 180 of those that will obtain a level gain. All of our students don't come to us ready to graduate. Some of them come with 0 years experience. Some of them come with 5th grade skills. But our goal is to make sure that they're making progress toward that credential. We also have awarded 151 career readiness credentials. But I want to spotlight our students, if you'll allow me just a second, and I know I have 5 minutes, so I'm rushing right on through this. These students are interviewed when they enter our program, and we ask them, again, the question, why are you here? And generally it's about getting a credential of some sort. But I want to bring your attention to what each of these students said, and all students generally say, without exception, when they leave the Rogers Center, that the best thing about W.R. Rogers is our teachers and our staff. Some quotes are, the staff is amazing because they go the extra mile to help you better yourself. Here, this student says the best thing about it is the way that they care about you and they never give up on you. They say the staff is encouraging and kind. They say that the W.R. Rogers has the best teachers. And these students simply says to us what we know already, is that we have the best staff in Richland District 2. No argument from any other principals. We have the best staff in Richland District 2, bar none. Some of the accolades of our faculty and staff, which indicates that we are not just sitting, that we're making a movement to affect the community. As your director, I serve on the Midlands Workforce Development Board, as well as will serve next year as the president-elect of the South Carolina Association of Adult Ed Directors Division of SCASA. Our bookkeeper, Alice Leeper, has earned national certification from the National Association of Certified Education Office Professionals, and Ms. Davis is right on track to also earn that. In summary, as I said at the beginning, students come to us looking for credentials, but they leave us with an educational experience that prepares them for a better life and a better future. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham, for your presentation. I've got a few comments, but I'll wait until after board members have asked questions or comments from board members at this time.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Shad.
Thank you, Ms. Cunningham, as always, for an excellent presentation and your commanding voice. I suspect you are the same when you were at W.R. Rogers.
I say less
W. Rogers.
and listen more.
Okay.
And learn a lot, by the way.
And learn a lot, absolutely.
Learn a lot.
I did want to ask, is financial literacy part of the learning environment as well for our students?
Absolutely. One of the days in the 48 hours that we prepare them for the workplace is all about financial literacy. We have partnerships with TD Banks and with several other financial institutions. One of them is City of Columbia, that comes out every 2 weeks and presents to our orientation classes.
Okay.
It's a major part of what we do.
Thank you. And while we celebrate all our students in terms of graduation and the pomp and circumstance, I know that your graduation is on June 4th.
Yes.
I believe starting at 7 o'clock.
Yes.
Could you let us know exactly where that is and let the public know where that is?
That
just
will
in case
be
they
at
might
the
want to
Richland
see.
School District 2 auditorium that is located on the Richland Northeast campus. It will be at 7 o'clock, and it will be at 7 o'clock sharp.
And I would join you. I'm sure you join me in asking that folks get there a little bit beforehand,
Yes.
just to see the folks arriving in. It's a wonderful treat to see them coming.
Thank you.
And yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shad. Any other questions or comments from board members?
Thank you so kindly.
If not, thank you for your presentation, for
Thank
the
you.
information you provide. And I just as my own little personal testimony, I know that as board members, we have one employee, that's the superintendent, and we typically direct any questions or concerns we have through our superintendent. But it just gives me pleasure to have said over the years since I've been on the board and before, that when people have questions or their students may have gone astray or lost their way and are struggling to try to get back on track for whatever reason, that's not always a reason, but I'm able to say, oh, just call Mr. Cunningham with the adult ed, and people have done that and without exception have come back to me and thanked me for the conversations that you've had with them not just about requirements in the classroom, but about life experiences and suggestions for them just not about just, course credits. And I just wanted to thank you for that publicly. I've thanked you a million times when I see you, but I want to thank you for that publicly. Clearly you walk the talk that you talk, and we appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
At this time, we've arrived at item 8 on our agenda.
Madam
Public
Chair?
participation.
Madam
We
Chair?
have Mrs. Agostini.
If I may, I'd like to make a few comments about public participation, so they're not to be perceived as responding to the participants prior to the start of public participation.
Actually, I've got a couple comments of my own. If you could yield for just for a moment, if you could, please.
Yes.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. We have two persons who've signed up this evening. As always, we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. If you have less than that, that's fine. Refrain from any personal identifying information with regard to your address. Please give us your name. Refrain from identifying specific students or teachers or schools in your comments. And I'd also like to share a few reminders from policy BEDB, public participation at meetings. Public participation will be permitted only as indicated on the agenda and the discretion of the board. In order that the board may conduct the meeting in a civil and professional manner, comments from the public should not include gossip, defamatory words or items or abusive and vulgar language. The board reserves the right to terminate any presentation which does not adhere to the guidelines set forth in policy BEDB in its entirety. The chairman reserves the right to limit discussion of same topic issues in an effort to provide individuals the opportunity to be heard on a variety of topics. The chairman also reserves the right to limit time for individual speakers. Public participation will not exceed 3 minutes unless waived by a majority of the board. Consideration may be given for a public hearing for gaining input on critical issues. The board will not permit in public session any expression of personal complaints about individual school personnel or any other person connected with the school system. The board will not permit in public session any expression of personal complaints about individual school personnel or any other personnel connected with the school system. Specific student or personnel issues should be handled through the appropriate procedures as indicated in the district policy. The chairman reserves the right to limit discussion of same topic issues in an effort to provide individuals the opportunity to be heard on a variety of topics. The board may provide factual information or recite existing policy in response to inquiries, but the board will not deliberate or decide matters regarding any subject not included on the agenda. The board may request that staff members address any concerns or comments presented by the public during the open forum. Persons appearing before the board are reminded that members of the board are without authority to act independently as individuals in official matters. Questions may be directed to the board, but answers must be deferred pending consideration by the board. The first person that we've had to sign up this evening is Mr. Mobley, James Mobley.
Madam Chair, may I speak?
I'm sorry. Your
Thank
comment,
you.
Ms. Agostini?
Thank you. After last week's meeting, I became concerned and felt that the board was being inconsistent in the way that we were implementing our public participation. So I requested the forms that the public is required to fill out. In requesting those forms, there were a couple of things that I noticed. First, we've had a few complaints about the order in which people are chosen to speak. I noticed that on March 12th, there was a change in the Richland School District 2 public participation request to speak form. There was an additional sentence added, which stated, "The numbers on the sign-up sheet do not signify speaking order. Speakers may be called in an order assigned by the chair after receiving completed forms." So this had been changed. Secondly, just to address the issue, I feel like we've been inconsistent implementing this policy. Prior to February meetings, our former board chairs welcomed anyone to come and speak during the public participation portion, whether they had signed up or not. On a February 12th meeting, we denied a participant. The chair stated as they had missed the signups. They had not signed in on the sign-up list, nor had they signed the form. The chair stated we are going to strictly adhere to board policy going forward because we are trying to be as ethical and policy-abiding as we possibly can. However, on March 26th, a different community member came to speak, who admittedly showed up late, had signed up on the list, but the forms had been pulled. When I expressed a concern to our board chair in an email, she responded by saying she chose to allow her latitude to allow the person to speak. At our last meeting, a different member who followed all the steps, had signed up on the form, had completed, or had signed up on the list and had completed the form and also put 2 topics down, was denied his 3 minutes to speak. So I just want to bring that to the board's attention that I feel we are not being consistent in the way we implement policy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, members of the public, for listening to us this evening. The reason that I shared policy BEDB in segments of its entirety, and feel free to pull that up, is because we are being consistent. I am one of those board chairs who was very happy to have board members come up and sign up during the meetings and come and speak and go well beyond 3 minutes, contrary to public participation policy. However, when our meetings became out of order, when they became a 3-ring circus and people used my graciousness and latitude for personal gain and for insult, I chose to abide by public policy. I don't make apologies for that. I'm happy to abide by public policy. And the reason that I read certain segments of the policy BEDB is to explain why a person was denied the comments when he started saying that it's my favorite topic, talking about illegal and started there. The board member who had signed up, the person who did sign up previously but didn't have a form, had she been out of order with regard to her comments, would have been stopped as well. So thank you so much for bringing that to our attention, Ms. Agostini. I'm happy to address that publicly. At this time, Mr. Mobley, we'd love to hear from you. Good afternoon.
Just finished talking about some of the stuff I'm finna talk about. I believe that the board should give the public a chance for participation and feedback for at least 5 minutes to let you know how they feel about what you're doing. I feel the board would benefit from transparency. The people in this community voted you into your positions and gave you bonds to work with. Community members want to know what you are doing and would like to be able to trust you with the education of their children. And if you don't have the passion for our children, then you don't need to be there. Some board members have already expressed interest in putting policies up so that the people know what the board is doing. We feel that the board has not addressed this. We want you to know what you're doing. We want to know what you're doing because it affects our children, parents, and teachers. And I want to say that I apologize to Mr. James Manning already for some things I did to him in our last election. And I'm apologizing to him publicly today. You have hurt Ms. Agostini, and I'm sad about that. I believe that she deserves an apology. Unity should be a driving factor on this board. You can't agree to disagree. What happens in the district, we will keep you responsible, not the administrators. Lastly, teachers, hold your ground. 2020 election is coming, and remember the governor and the superintendent of education did not support you. The legislature passed a few dollars to you, that they give a few dollars, they give more dollars to bingo halls than they gave you. So they passed a few dollars for you, didn't let the clock run out, so you had to wait for it. And you had to make it right when you get to the polls in 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mobley, for your comments. At this time, we'll hear from Mr. Steve Nussum. I'm sorry. Oh, did he step out? Okay. Well, we have a second opportunity for public participation, so we'll just call on him at that time. At this time, moving right along in our agenda, we've arrived at item 9.1, legislative update. Mr. Shad.
Madam Chair, thank you very much, and members of the board. The only part of the legislative update that I would mention is, as we know, there's been a lot been said about the proposed Education Reform Act, and as I understand it, it remained in the Senate, and so it was not passed. This is year one of the 2-year session, so I expect it to come back up next year in January of 2020, and it may look different. I'm not sure, and of course, really not as an aside, but we gathered on May 1st to address some of these concerns that the teachers had, and my hope is that it had some impact on the legislature. So thank you all for your efforts.
Mr. Shad, thank you for your report. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Shad's report at this time? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 10 on the agenda, specifically item 10.1, student appeals. If we could receive a motion at this time.
Madam Chair,
Dr. Elkins-Johnson.
I would like to make a motion on student appeals, but I would like to have number 2, student number 5, and student number 9 pulled. Student number 1, Blythewood Academy for 45 days. Student number 3, deny the appeal. Student number 4, return to school on strict probation with LRADAC. Student number 6, return to school with probation with services. Thank you. Student number 7, return back to school on probation. Student number 8, Blythewood Academy for 45 days with LRADAC. Thank you. That's number 8 with strict probation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Elkins-Johnson. Is there a second with regard to your motion?
We need to repeat it one more time, please.
Do you want to repeat it one more? There's a request to repeat it one more time, Dr. Elkins-Johnson.
Oh, thank you, Mrs. Agostini. No glasses. I'm going to do my best.
It's Ms. Sherman's request, not mine.
Ms. Sherman, thank you. Okay. Student number 1, Blythewood Academy for 45 days with strict probation, 45 days. Student number 3, deny the appeal. Student number 4, return back to school with LRADAC and strict probation. Student number 5, Blythewood Academy for 45 days.
That's student number 6. Student number 5 was pulled.
Thank you. Student number 6, return to school with strict probation.
And services.
And services. Thank you, colleagues. See, they have my back. That's a good thing. Student number 8, Blythewood Academy for 45 days with LRADAC. And student number 7, return back to school with strict probation.
Is there a second with regard to Dr. Elkins-Johnson's motion?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes. It's been moved by Dr. Elkins-Johnson and properly seconded. Motion's on the table, board members. Is there any discussion regarding the motion? And Dr. Elkins-Johnson, as is customary, if you just wait until it pops up on the screen to verify that your motion is accurate. And with regard to transparency, we don't have any information on the screen with regard to details of students because that's confidential information, so.
Will we be able to verify
Okay.
the information or just take the vote?
Just as a point of information, this is one of the glitches for board talks. Sometimes it moves a little slowly. So in an effort to move quickly and be respectful of your time, we'll do a hand vote if the system ever hangs up for more than a few seconds.
It's correct.
Thank you, Dr. Elkins-Johnson. It's been moved and properly seconded. Hearing no discussion, we will still be able to cast our votes electronically. Do you want us to do a hand vote, Mrs. Sherman? Okay. All those in favor of Dr. Elkins-Johnson's motion, if you indicate by raising your right hand. And by a vote of 7-0, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Dr. Elkins-Johnson. With regard to the remainder of the students?
Yes, student number 2, Blythewood Academy for 45 days.
Thank you, Dr. Elkins-Johnson. Is there a second with regard to the motion on the floor?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Shad. It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion from board members? Hearing none, would you like for us to indicate by hand vote, Mrs. Sherman, or? Okay. All those in favor of the vote, if you would indicate by raising your right hand. All those opposed? By a vote of 4-3, the motion carries. Dr. Elkins-Johnson?
Student number 5, Blythewood Academy for 45 days.
Thank you, Dr. Elkins-Johnson. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Shad. The motion on the floor is for Blythewood Academy for 45 days. It's been properly seconded. Is there any discussion from board members? Hearing none, we will cast a hand vote. Is that correct, Mrs. Sherman? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your right hands. All those opposed? By a vote of 4-3, I'm sorry, did you get a chance to, okay. By a vote of 4-3, the motion carries. I should have waited to make sure you had an indicator of all the hands raised. If you continue, Dr. Elkins-Johnson.
Student number 9, I'd like to make a motion for Blythewood Academy for 45 days.
Thank you, Dr. Elkins-Johnson. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Mr. Shad. The motion has been made and properly seconded. Is there any discussion from board members? Hearing none, we will indicate a hand vote. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed? By a vote of 6-1, the motion carries.
Madam Chair,
Dr. Elkins-Johnson.
I would just like to make a comment tonight.
Oh, did you want to go?
No, tonight is just a great night. This is the first time with student appeals that my heart is feeling overwhelmed, because as an educator, you guys know how passionate I am about keeping students in school if possible. And tonight, my board showed as much kindness, love, and support to support our babies, because they are our babies. They don't live with us, they live with you guys, but I still call them my babies. So my heart is just joyful and overwhelmed tonight to see that our babies are going to remain in school, whether it's their home school or Blythewood Academy. And that means so much to me. So thank you, board, and thank you, parents, because you're the child's first teacher. So we appreciate you. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Elkins-Johnson. Is there a motion with regard to the student admission request into the district's adult education program? And it says request, but it's actually one.
Madam Chair.
Mr.
I'd actually like to make a
Mr. Manning?
follow-up comment, if that's okay.
Mr. Mann, yeah.
On discipline, I do
not a
agree
motion.
that we have to keep as many students as we can in school, but teachers, I want you to know I draw a hard line. Students who cuss out our teachers, hit our administrators, abuse our staff, I am not okay with those students continuing to come back. So I do support our folks, and I understand these are hard decisions, hard on the the parents, but I support you. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manning. Is there a motion with regard to the student admission request into the district's adult education program? That's item 10.2.
Madam Chair,
Dr. Elkins Johnson.
I would like to make the motion for acceptance into the student adult education program.
Thank you, Dr. Elkins Johnson. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you, Dr. Caution Parker. I think both of you spoke at the same time. It's been moved and properly seconded that we accept the student request for admission into the district's adult education program. Is there any discussion regarding the same? And this would be the place for discussion, board members. Hearing none, would you like for us to indicate a hand vote, Mrs. Sherman? All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your right hand. All those opposed? By a vote of 7-0, the motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Elkins Johnson. Moving right along to item 11, old business action requested. We will need to receive a motion at this time with regard to the policies here. We can go through them one by one, or whoever makes the motion can lump them together as they deem fit. And just to let people, that's at the pleasure of whomever makes the motions, the motions this evening. And just for the public to know, that I know we have this available online. All of the policies that we go over are available online, and we have them on our screens the same way as they are presented online. So,
Madam Chair,
starting with yes, Mr. Manning.
can I make a motion?
You're welcome to do so, Mr. Manning.
I'd like to make the motion that we accept the policy revisions for GBG, GBH, GC.
If I could stop you for a minute, if you give us the descriptions of them too,
You want me to read all of it?
if you don't mind.
All right, I'll
Thank
make
you
a
so
motion
much.
that we approve the revisions to policy CBG, legal defense of staff, policy GBH, staff participation in community activities, policy GCBD, professional staff fringe benefits, policy revision GDBD, support staff fringe benefits, revision GCQE/GDQC, retirement of professional and support staff, policy GBGAA, medicines, policies revision GBEA, conflict of interest/staff ethics, and policy revision CCA, organization chart.
And Mr. Manning, just as a point of clarification, I think the first time you said CBG, but we know that you meant GBG, if you allow
that would
that
be-
friendly amendment.
Yeah, sorry, GBG, thank you.
Thank you. Is there a second with regard to Mr. Manning's motion?
Second?
Thank you, Mrs. Agostini. Is there any discussion regarding the regarding the policies set forth? Dr. Elkins Johnson.
Just a comment. Again, we have people who have taken time from their busy schedule and a long day to come here to be a part of our meeting, and still we're not showing them enough respect to have it posted on the wall. Again, I'm going to continue to ask for this until it's done. I hope that more of you who are taking time from your busy schedule to come here will come to the podium and demand, since you voted for us, that we can have the courtesy to post it up for you so you don't have to use your cell phone or you don't have to go to the website. We have so much technology. We have these smart, bright people here that can quickly put it on the screen, and I don't even know why it's not there. I don't know if it's because I'm asking. Maybe I need to seek one of my colleagues to ask. Maybe they can get it done a little faster than I can. But every board meeting, I'm going to make the same request until it's done. So I will ask my colleagues and the superintendent to please respect the public and respect me as a school board elected member to place the policies up on the screen so people who are sitting out here will have the opportunity to read and to understand what we're voting on. Thank you.
Madam
Dr.
Chair.
Elkins Johnson, are there any other comments at this time?
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, I have, my light was on.
Dr. Holmes, I'm sorry, Dr. Holmes.
Again, I concur with my colleague. I said at the last meeting, I agree that these policies are too important for us to just whip through them without the public knowing, because they're going to affect the people, a lot of the people that are in this room. As a matter of fact, tonight, I do have a policy that I'm not in favor of, and I think, so we did it as a sweeping whole again, and I think that that is a mistake. We need to look at these policies individually. Dr. Elkins is correct. correct, and I've also said at the last meeting, these policies need to be up here. People need to have an opportunity to see what we are voting on. It is not right to rush through this because this is what you're asking people to live by. And again, I said at the last board meeting, I don't know if you want me to go into this or not. Is there discussion about the particular policies at this time?
I was going to say, you're welcome to make any comments or questions you have about the policies. Now's the time to do so.
Yes,
Dr. Holmes, you're welcome to do so.
Yes, I have a comment about the policy, the nepotism policy. I brought it up last week that stated that no school board members, et cetera, board people's families could work in the district. And that has caused this where a lot of people cannot work in this district. I found on the internet what other districts are using as a policy. And I have submitted to each and every board member this policy. And this is what I think it should be. And I don't have my glasses, I'm not gonna read it out loud, but they have it. They know exactly what I've sent to them. Also, in addition to that, not only sending this policy to them, our district has an extended version of the policy, which I do not understand why we would extend that particular policy. We are a big enough district where nepotism is not an issue for us. So you mean to tell me as a sitting board member, and again, I'm gonna say this publicly, I have no stake in the game. I'm not trying to get anybody hired. This is not why I'm saying this. I'm saying this for future board members or anybody else. If a bus driver wants to work in our district, and because I sit on the board, they can't work in the district. So you'd have a person that pays taxes in the district that can't work in the district because we sit on the board. We have a bright teacher. Any one of us could have a child that is the brightest, could have been the teacher of the year, and we wouldn't hire him in the district because one of us sits on the board. As it was stated earlier, the only person that the board supervises is the superintendent. We don't supervise teachers. We don't overlook and see what they do. That is not our job. So, and we also with this policy, we're not talking about taking this policy and making all of our people superintendents or deputy superintendents. All we're talking about with this particular policy and the revision that I have submitted is saying that they can be teachers within the district. In a time where there's a shortage for teachers, we don't need to be excluding anybody from the process. So I'm going to ask my colleagues before they take the vote on this to remind them of what I sent them. I think we should have done this separately because this is not a wholesale sweeping policy. And I'm asking them to look at that particular policy and pull that out because I think that we have got to take the time to do this and do this correctly.
Dr. Holmes, thank you for your comments. In response, please know that whomever makes the motion is at liberty to make it collectively or individually. So that is at the liberty of the person who makes the motion. The board is free to vote that motion up or vote that motion down. So please know that that is at the liberty of whomever makes the motion. It's not a board policy. Whoever makes the motion is free to make it as they deem. If you're not happy with that motion, feel free to vote it down and go individually. That's the pleasure of the board. Mr. Shadd, I believe I heard you had a comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And
yes, Mr.
Just to, with regard to Dr. Holmes, I believe what she's saying is, and I may be wrong about this, but I believe she is, well, if she's not doing it, then I'm doing it. I'm asking Mr. Manning in terms of a friendly amendment to remove GBEA so that we can look at that one specifically. But I don't have a problem with the bulk, with the remainder staying as a motion, if he's willing to entertain that friendly amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Shadd. Mr. Manning?
Madam Chair, as far as Robert's rules, is that allowable to do that at this point after a second's been made?
He can make you can accept it or deny his request.
Yeah, then I'll accept that the policy GBEA, correct staff code of ethics or conflicts of interest / staff ethics be pulled out for separate consideration.
Thank you.
There is a motion on the floor, board members. There has been a friendly amendment that's been accepted. Is there a second to the, well, actually, we don't have to because he's accepted it. Is there any further discussion regarding the policies that are set forth at this time?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Mr. Shadd.
To piggyback to what Dr. Elkins Johnson said, I am also in agreement for the policies to be displayed. However, I would prefer that it be done during the first reading. The public will have an opportunity to look at those. That's usually when we actually make the most comments at first reading. And then once staff has come back with our recommendations for changes or what have you, then at second reading, just as Mr. Manning is doing with his motion, when it's perhaps when the motion includes all of these policies or a number of these policies at one time, I think it will be impossible to put those policies up on the board in bulk. So I definitely agree with it in first reading, but in second reading, especially if we're going to be voting on it rather quickly, I think it's a practical matter. Those policies, they may go up there, but we'd be going through them very quickly because then the vote would occur very quickly.
Madam Chair?
I see you. Yes, thank you, Mr. Shad. Did that conclude your comments?
Yes.
Mrs. Agostini?
I concur with Mr. Shad's suggestions. What I would like to see, though, is the changed policies that we're voting on available should we have a discussion like we're about ready to have. That policy can be put up so that the public can see exactly what we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Agostini. Are there any comments?
I concur with her concurrence.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Manning?
I'm also fine with displaying the policy. I think any time to kind of maybe elaborate in a slightly different way than Mr. Shad, but say the same thing, is when we're discussing individual policies. So anytime we're discussing a single policy, that policy be displayed so that we can see what the particular portion of that policy that's under discussion is about. So when they do bulk, obviously it's difficult to display, but I'm in agreement.
Dr. Elkins Johnson, did you have a comment?
Thank you, colleagues, for your kindness. And I would just ask that we not do bulk so we can go slowly and take our time through each policy. Even if we don't have comments, just display it just to give the people sitting out here an opportunity to read through it quickly, and then we can vote and move forward. But I do thank you for your kindness.
Thank you, Dr. Elkins Johnson. Are there any other comments with regard to the policy and the motion that's on the floor as it states? And I do have a comment, but I'll wait until we get through the motion that's on the floor at the time. If there's no further discussion with regard to the motion that's on the floor, it's been properly seconded. We will call the question at this time. And the amendment has been to remove policy GBEA. I don't know if you can, so it's on screen as is. So are we to consider that it's going to be removed for the motion? Is that correct? The second for the original motion? It does. It does. It should not be there. There were several, but I recognize you. It's the last one. So is it possible to
Yeah, if we can remove that
display
last
the motion without policy GBEA? And let me just say again, the way that motions are displayed, it's at the pleasure of whomever makes the motion. We've had people who've made the motions individually, those who've done it collectively. So whomever makes the motion, I can't dictate how you make the motion. That's your choice.
All right, Madam Chair, that now appears to be correct.
Thank you. The pop-up on our screen, do we need to refresh it, Mrs. Sherman, or is it? Okay. It is. All right. So the pop-up that appears on screen is correct, and we'll call the question at this time. Okay. Okay, but I think it's accurate. The pop-up, I think I cast my vote. Another pop-up came up, but it looks to be accurate. GBEA is not there. Do you want us to cast our votes again, Mrs. Sherman? The motion, as stated, carries has passed by a vote of 7-0 unanimously. So my understanding, board members, the will of the board is that we will go back and revisit policy GBEA, conflict of interest, staff ethics, so that it reads correctly with regard to Dr. Holmes' information that you sent us earlier. Is that correct? Is that the will of the board?
No, we need to have a motion on that
We need to have-
separately.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd like a motion that we approve the revisions to policy GBEA, conflict of interest / staff ethics is presented.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion regarding that policy? I have a comment. Is that something that we want to see before we vote on board members? Because I think the language is going to, do you have some input as to where the language goes? Dr. Holmes, is it something you want to see before we vote on? And that's just my question. That's the will of the board.
Okay, I'm sorry. I misinterpreted what we were doing. I apologize.
It's okay. It's okay.
Mr. Manning, if I'm correct, you would like to see the policy as it was presented earlier to stay the same. Is that correct?
That's correct. I have a concern with board members, and again, this is direct board members' family, so this is it's defined in the policy, but it's, father, mother, sister, brother, in-law kind of direct relationships. I just have a concern that puts undue pressure on our superintendent when it comes to evaluation of those staff members, and I just think for best public interest, we should just keep that as a clean line. That's my opinion. So I don't agree with the changes as you recommended them.
Madam Chair.
Understood, Mr. Manning, Dr. Elkins Johnson, and then Mrs. Agostini. Dr. Holmes, is your light on, or no? Let's stop Dr.
I'll
Johnson.
wait till they.
I understand
Johnson, you have the floor.
Yes, I understand what Mr. Manning is saying, but if you think back to so many of our family members, and I say us because I don't have any family members in the district at all, but we have board members that currently sit here, as well as the superintendent, who has family members who've been grandfathered into the district. So let's see the broader picture. Let's look at the district as a growing district. And let's think about all these wonderful teachers that may be coming in the future.
That's right.
So what is wrong with us allowing family members, I have no family members in Richland too,
Either.
to be a part of Richland too, as long as they're not supervised by their immediate family. So I will support what Dr. Holmes is trying to get completed. So I hope that my colleagues would just vote Mr. Manning's request down.
Madam Chair.
Mrs. Agostini.
No, I concur with Mr. Manning on this issue. I just think it's not even just the superintendent. I worry about all the other administrators and teachers here that if they are supervising a board member's relative, it's unnecessary stress. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Agostini. Dr. Holmes?
Yes. Again, as my colleague, Dr. Elkins, has pointed out, there have been family members working in this district for years. What is the difference? There have been family members working in this district for years. It has never been a policy or an issue. Again, I'm going to say this publicly so everybody will understand. I have no dog in the race for this. I have no children, family members, cousins, brothers who want to work in the district. I'm thinking about the future of this district. If it was not a problem before, why is it a problem now? Why would we turn away qualified people? Because what? Because the board has changed? I question that.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes. Mrs. Agostini and
It is
Dr.
in
Davis.
fact, please correct me if I'm wrong, but is it not policy currently right now as it stands, the way it reads, that is old information that we're trying to change? We're trying to shorten it up, but that is policy as it stands. Or please correct me.
The policy is stated, actually, some adoptions have been made from board recommendation. It has been extended up to the superintendent's cabinet as a recommendation to the board. Prior to that, it was at the director's level, so which it gives it more. Gives us a little bit more latitude to bring individuals on. Teachers or certified staff who are already in place prior to board members being elected or the superintendent being appointed are protected by the Teacher Dismissal Act. So our nepotism policy could not supersede the state's law for teacher removal. And so that's why individuals were able to stay in their certified positions. Prior to that, it also included that classified staff also had to relinquish their responsibilities after a year. And I believe we made an adjustment to that to allow classified staff members to stay on as well, to allow us to continue to hire individuals into the district and grow our district.
I'm sorry,
Thank you,
I
Dr.
wasn't
Davis.
clear on that. And so he gave us a great, long explanation, but I'm speaking in terms of the board member and the relations and the definition. That has been longstanding, or that's been in policy.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Dr. Holmes, your light is lit.
Yes, our policy, from what I understand, there were additional family members added to that. That was not the standard one that was in there. There were additional family members added to that. So it was not the original one.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes. Dr. Dawkins-Johnson.
And I would like to say too, just because that's the way we've always done it, doesn't mean that's how we have to continue to do it. And again, we have board members who have family members who are currently working in the district, but has been grandfathered in because of this. So what's the difference? What is the difference if you have spouses who also work in the district who supervises someone? It could be the same thing, as well as when you have an aunt or in-laws that work in the district. So I would like to see us not do things the old way, and let's get aboard the 21st century and let's move forward.
There is a
Madam
motion
Chair.
on the floor. Mr. Manning.
I just want to clarify, the policy does not state that an aunt is a board member's family member.
It does.
I just want to be clear.
Okay, am I reading something wrong? I'm looking at page 2. It does indeed say that. For the purpose of this policy, an employee's family member is defined as his or her spouse, child, stepchild, parent, step-parent, brother, step-brother, sister, step-sister, grandparent, grandchild, mother, father-in-law, brother, sister-in-law, son, daughter-in-law, aunt, uncle, nephew, and niece. That's an addition in yellow. That is on the page 2.
Thank you.
The 1, 2, 3, third full paragraph from the bottom. It is the second paragraph that's actually in yellow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In other words, your whole family.
So, Madam Chair, then I do have a recommendation, because it says there's a paragraph above that describes family member that's different than that, which is where I was reading, that says,
Okay.
and right under nepotism, it says family member includes the board member's spouse, parent, brother, sister, child, mother-in-law, father-in-law, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, grandparent, or grandchild. It does not include, so that is contradictory to what's in yellow.
As the South Carolina law reads, yeah.
So we just need to either pick one or the other.
Yes, Mr. Manning, that's just a restating of the South Carolina Code, Section 813-750. The additional information was information that was added by district administration to extend that to aunt, uncle, nephew, and niece for the board's consideration.
Okay, then. So my clarity is that our current policy doesn't include aunts. So when we say we have board members that have family members in the district, that's based off of current policy. If we pass this policy, that would be different.
Okay, board members, there is a motion on the floor. At this time, we can vote the motion up, we can vote the motion down. My recommendation, and this is just a discussion, it is that the pleasure of the board is that we make sure that we get something that we're all comfortable with. If the motion passes, great. If it does not, we go back to the drawing board. That's my recommendation. But that is one board member. It is the will of the board, and the motion will indicate that. There's a motion on the floor.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Shad.
I'm in favor of what Dr. Holmes is suggesting. And I will say that it appears that there's a conflict in the law. The family member that's defined in the proposed, right under nepotism, as Mr. Manning said, Section 813-100, subsection 15.
Page 2.
Yes, page 2. That defines what family member is.
I'm sorry, you guys can't see that. Hopefully next time you'll be able to.
And,
Go ahead, Mr. Shad.
and the
You have the floor,
highlighted
Mr. Shad.
portion further down on page 2 extends it by recommendation of the district to add aunt, uncle, nephew, niece. The statute, that is over and above what both of those are over and above what the statute calls for with regard to teachers who are family members of school board members coming into the district. And it allows for those folks to come into the district provided that the board approves them. And I apologize, I'm trying to find out exactly, that would be code section, waiting for it to come up, 59-25-10. The title of that is Employment of Teachers Related to Board Members or Serving as Board Members. This talks about immediate family. And then it reads, for purposes of this section, the immediate family of a member of the Board of Trustees shall include only his parents, children, brothers, or sisters. So while the legislature has said in 59-25-10 that they are barred from doing it, coming in, unless, well, they're barred from doing it, it's limited to those specific members. I believe that this proposed policy is going well beyond what the legislature allowed, which is our prerogative if it goes through. But even the legislature apparently felt that it was okay for family members of board members that don't fit into this immediate family designation, that it's allowed. So I would be in favor of Dr. Holmes' effort and ask Mr. Manning for a friendly amendment to limit it to immediate family of the member of the Board of Trustees that tracks the language of 59-25-10 and then remove the other designations by the proposal as well as what's currently in place under 813-115.
Thank you, Mr. Shad. I'm going to call the question. There's a motion on the floor, board members.
Well, I will consider
Do you have-
Mr. Shad's change if it's just the definition of the family member to follow state law.
And Mr. Manning, if I can add, I think Dr. Franklin is trying to get our attention to share some information. Is that your will?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to explain
And it falls under the purview of discussion. I think she's trying to give some clarification.
Why family member is defined differently. At the top of page 2 in the nepotism section, that defines family member of a board member as it is in state statute. The section that the administration added that's highlighted in yellow, that defines family member of an employee, just as it's defined in other policies. For example, in our leave policy, this is how we define the family member of an employee. So the section that's highlighted in yellow isn't referring to board members, family members, it's referring to employees, family members.
So Dr. Franklin, making the motion, let me just be clear. So the policy, as y'all have presented it, says that, so me as a board member, family is what's in the, is what is
First paragraph.
in the first paragraph. Family for any other employee is what's in the yellow. And the changes that the policy is proposing loosens the nepotism policy for those family members so that it really mostly directly affects cabinet members now versus other employees.
That's correct. It was.
Unless there's direct supervision.
At the director level and above, and now it's just at the cabinet level, which includes the superintendent, the assistant superintendents, and the chief officers.
Okay, but according to Mr. Shad, even the policy as it currently stands, we have more direct family members defined than what the statute has in the South Carolina statute, according to what he just read.
Statute 8-13-750 does have more family members than the other statute that was referenced.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'm just gonna stick with my original motion. So,
Madam Chair.
Board members, there's Mr. Shad.
Dr. Franklin. Okay, the highlighted portion applies to an employee's family member.
for example, in other policies, like our leave policy, where we have to define an employee's family member, that is how it's stated. So we just replicated what was in the other policy in terms of defining an employee's family member.
But it's under nepotism, which addresses board members' family, correct?
Well, nepotism addresses board members as well as employee nepotism.
Okay, so please help me out. For the purpose of this policy, and I'm reading the highlighted part, and employees' family members defined, and it goes through, and you all have added for it to be more expansive to aunt, uncle, nephew, and niece. Wouldn't that still apply, saying that the employee's family member who runs for office and becomes a board member, that impacts them? If it's an aunt of a current employee, they become a school board member, then that stops that. If you go further up, I guess, that stops, let's see, an employee whose family member is subsequently elected to the board, appointed as superintendent, or assumes director may remain employed by the district but is ineligible for promotion. So in this case, if the aunt or the uncle is successful in running for the position, then this cuts off, because it's more expanded now. If it goes through, this cuts off the promotion, but they still get to keep their job.
Correct, unless it's a promotion from classified employment to a certified teaching position.
Okay. And so if you go further up into the paragraph, the definition of family member, which relates to the board member, again, my friendly amendment is to ask that that be limited, according to the statute, to just immediate family. Mr. Manning.
Thank you, Mr. Shad.
Yeah,
I'm Dr. Holmes and then Mr. Manning.
So, yeah, and Madam Chair, I know you called the question, so I kind of blew right through that. So I think I blew through.
It's okay, and the reason that I've allowed more time, we should have called the question by now, is because I think we want to make sure that we're all clear on what we're voting for, and so that's why we've extended that period. I've got you.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Dr.
Okay.
Holmes, sorry.
Yes, I'd like to read what I found that other districts are using. This is what I said that would be applicable to us. The district, I'm going to read just a part of it. The district will make a recommendation, will not make a recommendation for the appointment of a family member of the superintendent for a position in the district office, for a position as a principal or assistant principal, or any other position which is directly supervised or directly evaluated by the superintendent. The South Carolina Code 592510 provides that no school board member's immediate family member, parents, children, brothers, or sisters only may be employed without the written consent of the Board of Trustees. So there is a provision in that statute that says without the written consent of the board. And if something like that were to come up, and if it was a family member, I think it would be applicable for the particular school board to recuse themselves and let the the other board members have their way with that particular applicant. That's what I have suggested.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes. Dr. Elkins Johnson, or are we done with discussion?
No, just a comment. If there's anyone that's sitting out there that would like to see this, come on behind me. I'll share. So if you want to see it, because you can't see it out there, if you want to come back here and share with me, feel free. I'll make room in my chair for you too.
Any questions or comments pertaining this policy from board members? If not, there's a motion on the floor.
Can we repeat the motion, please?
I think the motion is indicated, Mr. Manning, if you'd like to repeat your motion, but I think it was to accept the policy as presented. But Mr. Manning, that is your pleasure.
That's right. I want to leave it as presented and let the board vote, and if it fails, then we can come back and reconsider it.
So
if it doesn't, we'll move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Manning. Accordingly, the request for the friendly amendment, it appears to have been denied, Mr. Shad. There is a motion on the floor, board members, if we could call the question at this time, and it is to accept policy GBEA, conflict of interest / staff ethics, as presented. Is that correct, Mr. Manning? Okay, it's been motioned and properly seconded, and we've dispensed with the discussion period. If we could call the question at this time. Do you need for us to do a hand vote? I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have a pop-up. Yes, I do. My apologies. Oh. Have all board members wishing to vote voted, aside from me? By a vote of 3 to 4, the motion fails. Is there an alternative motion at this time?
I'd like to make a motion that we go back and revise this policy and represent this policy, or use the policy that represent the policy.
There is a motion on the floor.
I'm sorry. Y'all know I'm new at this, so I'm gonna get
Dr.
this
Holmes,
right.
make that motion that you read that you would like to
Okay,
see.
I would like to make the motion that we accept the policy revisions that I made a few minutes ago and place that in the policy for our nepotism policy, for policy number GBEA.
State that policy.
Which do you prefer? Because you started asking us to go back and revisit it, Dr. Holmes?
No,
And your
the
second one was
policy
to-
that I read aloud.
Okay.
Second.
The motion has been made and properly seconded. Is there any discussion at this time? Mr. Shad?
I know this is unusual because we don't have it in front of, the public doesn't have it, but as a friendly amendment to the motion, I would suggest that the nepotism policy read as such. The district will not offer a recommendation for the appointment or transfer of any person to a position that would require the person to supervise and/or evaluate a family member, or be supervised and/or be evaluated by a family member. Those individuals serving in such positions as of April 22nd, 1996, may retain their positions provided the superintendent concludes that the continued assignments are in the best interest of the district. The superintendent may reassign any persons affected by this policy if he or she considers such reassignment to be in their best interest of the district. The district will not make a recommendation for the appointment of a family member of the superintendent for a position in the district office, for a position as a principal or as assistant principal, or for any other position which is directly supervised and or directly evaluated by the superintendent. The South Carolina Code Section 59-2510 provides that no board member's immediate family member, in parentheses, parents, children, brothers, or sisters only, may be employed without the written consent of the Board of Trustees.
That's the policy, correct, in whole. Thank you.
There is a motion on the floor. It has been properly seconded. Is there any further discussion? Mine is just that we see it, that we're able to see it. But I think that the way that you've read it has been, is that the policy you wish in its entirety, or is that the insertion?
That's the policy in its entirety.
In its entirety?
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes.
So are we voting to make this a policy, or are we voting to postpone the vote?
We're voting to make it policy.
Is there any further discussion with regard to the motion that is on the floor at this time? Mr. Shad, your light is lit. Did you have another comment?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Manning?
So, I mean, I understand the change. There are some other things in this policy that does not include, like engage in or have financial interest, engage in work of any type. I'm not reading the whole line, but there are several items in here that are not included. Nepotism was just one portion of that policy. So if we, as the motion's made, we are just addressing the nepotism component.
Yes, that's my understanding with the
Yes.
friendly amendment as well, because it really as to what's written on the vote, oh, she just took it down?
That's okay.
It is to revise policy GBE,
Yes.
not to replace it, but to
Yes.
revise policy GBEA to reflect the suggestions by Dr. Holmes, which was specifically the nepotism policy. So after it says nepotism,
specifically.
what I read into the record is what that change would be. And I believe Dr. Holmes
That is my
accepted that.
understanding as well. Is that your understanding, Dr. Holmes?
Yes, just for
Nepotism
clarity,
question.
to nepotism section.
Okay.
Just put a
Understood.
section.
That, okay, I have less heartburn about that. I thought
Okay,
we were,
yes.
yeah, and,
Thank you.
so for clarity, that is only for the nepotism section, not the policy in its entirety. Is that
Yes,
the
ma'am.
understanding of the will of the board?
Yes, Madam Chair.
There is a motion on the floor that should be dispensed with. There is no further discussion at this time. I do have a comment, not a question or comment. I do want to make a comment that because the district is so large, because we have a shortage of teachers, and because I think the policy as it is written now would be restrictive, of even, hiring teachers of relatives of certain members. I don't think the will or intention of the board is that you hire everybody's family who works in the district, all the staff members, all the executive staff, all the board members, make sure you hire. I don't think that's the will. It is my understanding that the restraints be loosened so that we do have positions, especially with an education teacher crisis in this nation, is particularly South Carolina, Richland County. I think it is to help us to be able to not be restrictive where we need to fill positions. And if I understand correctly, correct me, board members, if I'm not correct, no members of staff or board members would be directly supervising their relative, as I understand it. Correct me if I'm wrong. Hearing no further discussion, there is a motion on the floor. We can call the question at this time, Mrs. Sherman. And Dr. Holmes, it was your motion. Does the motion appear accurate as you intended it to be?
Yes.
To revise policy GBEA to reflect suggested changes in the participation by, okay. Does that appear accurate?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes. If there are no further discussion at this time, we'll call the question. If there is no further discussion, we'll call the question. Should we do so electronically or hand vote? Have all members wishing to vote voted, aside from me? By a vote of 4-3, the motion carries. Moving on in the agenda to item 12. And just as a point of clarity, I don't think anyone is trying to be evasive with regard to any of the policies we're discussing. If I'm not mistaken, Dr. Davis has already made action and has made the appropriate motions to have the policy shared on the board. He had to order a part to get that done. So no one's intention was to be evasive or not have anything on the board. We're actually working on that. It can't be done immediately. We had to order a part to have that done so that won't be an impediment in the future, if I'm correct, Dr. Davis. So thank you. Moving on to item 12, new business action requested. Dr. Davis.
Madam Chair, members of the board, we have coming before you Mr. Keith Price, who will give you a brief report about the makeup day. Did I stress brief? I'm sorry. A brief report about the makeup day. But he has some information he would like to share first before we make a motion for the board to consider. Mr. Price.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. I believe I got that hint, and I see that I stand between you and more policy revision proposals. So I will try to move swiftly, but will also be succinct. I come to you again tonight. This is my second time this school year with the topic of a makeup day request. And as a quick review, on May 1st, there was an event down at the State House called All Out for Education Advocacy. And as a result, here are a few numbers that impacted us here in Richland too. Approximately 24 hours before that event was to take place, in our system, we had 555 reported absences for that day. And of those 555, 353 jobs had not been picked up by substitute teachers. There was more expected to come in overnight as well as the following morning, which led to the superintendent's decision to cancel school on the day of May 1st. As a result, we have to consider the topic of making up that day. According to state law, if you miss a day, if we cancel a day of school, we have to make it up. The local school board of trustees, by a majority vote, may waive no more than 3 days as it relates to school closings due to snow, extreme weather conditions, or other disruptions. As a reminder, we had 5 days of school that we missed earlier in the year. We made up 3 of those days in semester 1 because we missed them in semester 1. There were 2 remaining days that the board voted to waive at our February 12th meeting, and now we have our 6th day that we have missed and now up for consideration. Quick recap of the law: days 1, 2, and 3 must be made up. Days 4, 5, and 6 must be made up unless the Richland 2 board votes to waive those days. Any days missed beyond 6 have to be made up unless they are waived by the State Board of Education. So as a result, we have some items to weigh, some options. Option number 1 is to waive the missed day from May 1st for students and employees. Option number 2 is to make up that missed day on Memorial Day on May 27th. That is currently not a day of school for students or employees. That could serve as a makeup day. Option number 3 is to make up the missed day on Friday, June 7th. Right now, the last scheduled day of school for students is June 6th, that Thursday. We would basically shift the items that we have planned for the end of the school year back a day. Wednesday right now is a half day for our elementary and middle students. That would shift to Thursday. Thursday is a half day for all students. That would shift to Friday. Friday is currently a work day for all employees. That would shift to Saturday. Okay? So there's 3 different options to consider. To be swift and succinct, the recommendation from the superintendent and his cabinet is option number 1, to waive the missed day on May 1st for all students and employees.
Thank you. Dr. Elkins Johnson?
I'd like to make the motion of option number 1 that we waive the day missed on May 1st for all students and employees.
Thank you, Dr.
Second.
Elkins.
Second.
Dr. Holmes is the voice I heard. There is a motion on the floor from Dr. Elkins.
I feel great. I haven't done any seconds in a long time.
There is a motion on the floor. It's been properly seconded, as is proper protocol. Is there any discussion with regard to said motion? Seeing no lights lit up at this time, we can call the question, and the vote, actually the prompt has already popped up, so please indicate your preference, board members. By a vote of 7-0, the motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Price, for your presentation. Moving on in our agenda. Item 13, new business, no action requested. Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, members of the board and public, we have before you proposals to the following board policies. I believe these board policies were submitted to the board on Wednesday, May 8th for your consideration and review. And we are looking for direction from the board as to the desire of these policies and how they should be read. The proposed policies will be policy revisions to GBEE, Internet and Electronic Communication. We have policy, which is a new policy revisions GBEEA, social media, again, a new policy. Policy GBEF, cellular phones and other personal electronic communications devices, again, a new policy for the board's consideration. Policy revisions GB, staff, personal security and safety, again, another new policy. Policies GCB, professional staff contract and compensation, a new policy. Policy revisions to GCFB, hiring administrative staff. This is a policy that is being suggested to rescind because this policy is being addressed in another section of our policy manual. And then policy revisions to GCR, non-school employment of professional staff. And I believe we have Ms. Williams to come before you to answer any questions as related to the policies as you receive them from administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Davis, for indicating all the policies. At this time, Ms. Williams will take questions or concerns from board members regarding the policies. As you have questions about specific policies or to go through them, that is the pleasure of the board. Dr. Elkins Johnson.
Yes, for policy GBEEA, Internet.
That's 13.2? It is social media.
Yes. So are you still working with 13.1 first?
I'm not.
And each
That's
one?
the
Okay.
pleasure, that's the pleasure of the board. If you want to start with
Yes, we can start in
13.1,
order.
and if there are no questions, we can
Yes.
move on. That is the pleasure of the board. Is that your pleasure, board members?
Yes, please.
Okay. Accordingly, item 13.1, policy revisions to GBEE, Internet and Electronic Communication. That is a new policy, as Dr. Davis has stated. If you have questions or concerns regarding that policy, now would be the time to address them, to air them rather. Hearing none, is it safe to move on to policy 13.2? Section 13.2, proposal of policy GBEEA, social media new. Dr. Elkins Johnson.
Yes. Just a question here where it says personal social media, and I think that's on page 2, the third paragraph, for those who can see it. And it talks about interacting with parents, legal guardians, or students in the center of school social media. So clarify that. Are you saying that if you go out to an event and you take pictures of students and you post them on your social media, that you will need parent permission to do that?
Wait, I'm sorry, Dr. Elkins, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I am interrupting you. I apologize. I don't see that. You're on page 2, did you say?
I believe so.
Second
See, if
paragraph?
it was up on the screen, I could.
And we're working on that. We can't get the part any quicker than we can.
Try to figure out what it is. I'm gonna let you guys who have not.
Personal social
made
media at the very
revisions,
bottom, I
that's
see
too
it.
small, I can't see it. So if you can find that area of social media, because I am not going to do it.
It's at the bottom of page 2, board members. It is actually the last
can find
paragraph
where it
on the bottom
says-
of page 2.
Personal social media, if you can find that area.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, ma'am.
It states, employees should not engage in personal social networking friendships with students enrolled in the district and are strongly discouraged from interacting with parents, legal guardians of students in the context of social media.
Right. So what are we saying, that you cannot take pictures or friend parents on social media sites?
The recommendation from the School Board Association is stating that it's strongly discouraged.
So what are we saying as a district? Are we going to support that or not support that? Because we have so many family members who are friends with faculty, district staff. So what we're saying, that we can't be friends on social media any longer?
Dr. Davis?
Yeah, we're presenting this policy to you for your input as the policymakers of the school district. So this is a brand new policy. We wanted to present it to you as written by the School Board Association for your feedback and discussion, and then we will share the revisions back with you. At this time, the administration doesn't have a recommendation for this particular policy.
I would love
you,
for
Dr.
administration to go back and come up with something. I know that we're always saying this is from the School Board Association, but if you think about it, I don't know too many of the School Board Association members who have ever been educators. So we're going to have to use common sense when we're doing these policies. I know what they say, but we're the policy makers, and then also we're leaving it up to Dr. Davis and his team to come back with a reasonable solution. And we all know that what you just read is not reasonable. So why even bring a policy to us that states that without even giving us the revisions before you came here?
If I may, Dr. Elkins Johnson, I appreciate the position, but we don't want to be misleading with the board as it relates to policy. So we're presenting this policy to you for your consideration and for your input, which we have been doing prior to. And so we don't have a necessarily recommendation at this time, but administration be more than happy, if that is the will of the board, to continue to provide our input and recommendations for policies and bring to you for your consideration during first reading. And we will be more than happy to receive, to take this policy back and bring it to you, all new policies that we're presenting to you with our recommendations for your consideration.
And this as a point of clarification, this is the time for us to make, well, we got them last week, but if there are recommendations or suggestions, I think that staff is actually entertaining those right now. Dr. Holmes and then Mr. Manning.
Yes, I concur with my colleague, Dr. Elkins. I think the policy on social media, that's not a realistic policy. I'm already friends with several other people, their parents, their teachers, and I think if we say we're supposed to be a district where we're like family, why would we not be? So I don't think that this is a necessary policy.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes. Mr. Manning?
Yeah, thank you. I think it also going back through the advisory committee with our teachers and staff to look at, but I'd also like to look at it just to make sure that there's no violation of first right amendments, because some of these is otherwise offensive is a term in here. Like, who's to determine what's offensive when it comes to some of that? So I know I just went through was in a session Monday on privacy, and some of the lawyers that got up are cautioning social media policies not to infringe on First Amendment rights. So if we can maybe have legal counsel just take a glance at it with that lens as well.
Thank you, Mr. Manning. Mrs. Agostini, and I'll get you Dr. Holmes.
Thank you. I also would like us to revisit the policy in terms of personal social media. I was friends with a lot of these teachers before my students ever went to public school, so I would like for us to address that. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I overlooked Mr. Shad, and then Dr. Holmes. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's okay. This is a new policy, as I understand it, that comes from School Boards Association. And while I understand Dr. Davis saying that it's coming from them and, whatever the will of the board is, I will note, though, on page 3, and we've seen this in other policy, that the district did make a recommendation, apparently, because you all have struck out the last sentence. So y'all have obviously looked at it and made a change. So I'm also I joined Dr. Elkins Johnson in her question with regard to the personal social media. Should we assume that because the district did not highlight or try to strike through that for us to review, that you all are in agreement with this as it is proposed? I know the board can do what they want, but we do want to get at least some input from the district, just like you did on the bottom of page 3.
And Dr. Holmes is next, but we've got a question of Dr. Davis, so please feel free to jump in.
I will yield to Dr. Holmes and follow her lead, listen to her request.
I think that it is very important for the public I think we need to reiterate this again. These policies that are being brought before you all and brought before us are suggestions.
I'm sorry.
They are suggestions. We are our own district, and you appointed us and you elected us to make decisions for you. And we can take these suggestions, but it is our duty to modify them to the will of the public that we serve and also to the best interest of everybody here. So I think Dr. Elkins was correct in saying, I understand that these are good baseline things to work from, but I do not think that we need to consistently present what is just pasted out as policy for a whole board, for a district that may not apply to a specific district.
Mr. Shad has a follow-up to his question, and then Dr. Davis. You didn't finish.
Thank you. And either Dr. Davis or Ms. Williams, do we currently have a policy in place for social media at all in our policy? I think the answer is no, but I tried to look very quickly.
I don't believe that we do, specifically addressing social media specifically. Ms. Williams?
That is correct. We do have a section in the staff conduct policy that addresses social media, but not a standing policy for social media.
Okay, thank you.
And I know that there's been a recommendation to get some legal counsel on this. I'm fine with that. My recommendation is that we insert language that talks about using discretion. I know there are teachers that use their personal social media. Social media is not just Facebook. There are teachers that use their social media, particularly on Twitter, and they have the parents' consent, to film certain class activities. The parents can click on the link and be able to see certain activities that their kids are participating in with the permission of the parents. So social media is not just Facebook, but I would recommend us adding something to do with our discretion. I'm okay with the policies coming to us, and it's our job to sit here and make recommendations, and I appreciate that. Dr. Davis.
I would just like to say that to address Dr. Elkins Johnson's concerns as well as Mr. Shad's concerns. I think Dr. Elkins Johnson's point of asking the question specifically about the district's position on employees should not engage in a personal social media friendship with students enrolled in the district or strongly discourages from interacting. We do suggest We did make changes to this policy, so I stand corrected. We did make some suggested changes to this policy. Therefore, the policies that you see is presented to you as administration, by administration as is. We also send policies to the board. I think you all received these policies on May 8th. And to my understanding, I have not received any suggestions as it relates to this policy or any questions as it relates to this particular section of this policy from anyone for consideration for administration, so that we could present the policy to you as desired, with desired changes from the board. I would ask that if that is indeed the case, particularly concerning the new policies, that we receive that information so that we can share with the board the recommendations from board members, as we stated in our previous board meeting, so that it is clear what recommendations are being made by school administration and by school board members. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mrs. Agostini, and then Dr. Elkins-Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to piggyback on what Dr. Holmes and Mr. Shadd said. I think for far too long, we have been making reference to these policies that they came from the South Carolina School Boards Association, and we're using them as the gold standard. We are the premier district. We should be setting the standard by proofreading these policies for content, punctuation, capitalization, et cetera. But we should be setting the standard and taking the School Board Association's recommendations into consideration as we are setting policy. Thank you.
Dr. Elkins-Johnson.
And I want to say thank you, Dr. Davis, for your comments. But I want it to be clear that, yes, you guys send these policies to us a week in advance. But if I suggest changes, my colleagues don't know what suggestions I'm making, and you can't just take the suggestion that I give you, because we always say it's at the will of the board. So that's why we should have these friendly conversations. And I think we owe it to the people who've elected us to have these conversations so they can see how we think and how we vote. So I'm not going to send my questions. I'm going to bring it to the public so they can hear what I'm thinking, how I feel, and so my colleagues can chime in so we can come to an agreement on what we think the policy should be, because it is at the will of the board. And then two, I could be thinking one thing, say that in the public, and could hear from my colleagues, and they can make me think, oh, I didn't think about it that way. So yes, we get a week in advance, but my questions may come the day of. And I'm gonna do that for the people who are sitting out here, although they can't see the policies, and maybe the part of being in 2 weeks for the next board meeting. I am going to bring my questions here so you can hear me and you can feel my passion, and that I can have a dialogue with my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Elkins-Johnson.
So pertaining to the question of social media, employees should not engage in personal social media friendships. It's the recommendation of administration that that section of the policy remains for your consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. And with regard to, I like to submit my suggestions beforehand if I have them. They're not stricken. Nothing is stricken. Nothing is stricken from the policies that we present. If I have a suggestion, it's just that, a suggestion. It's still going to be presented here, and it's not going to be anything hidden from anyone. But there's a recommendation well, there's no action. There's no action requested. The last thing I heard from a board member, I think, I'm sorry, Dr. Holmes, was that we.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Dr. Holmes.
I'm going to say this too.
Mr. Manning, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm going to say this also. I submitted, just like we just went through the policy that we just went through with nepotism, I submitted that, maybe not a week or so, but I did submit it ahead of time with the revisions and everything else in it. So that does occur, but Dr. Elkins is correct. We may get here and we talk it out and your mind may change, and that's supposed to be what happens in a situation when people are elected. You're supposed to have an opportunity to discuss these things out loud, get the public sense of opinion, and move on. Again, these are just mere suggestions, and we do have to have this opportunity to put these issues on the table and then make the best decision, not a rushed decision, but a best decision.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes. Mr. Manning.
Madam Chair, I make a recommendation that we provide more padded seats for our folks out in the audience for the meeting so that we have time to discuss the policies and they don't go numb while they're out there. That's my recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Manning. Duly noted. Dr. Davis.
Just bringing us back to the original question to address the policy. As stated by Dr. Elkins-Johnson's initial question, the recommendation from administration is that that section in question That is the recommendation of administration. Thank you.
Dr. Elkins-Johnson?
Yes, well, I would like for administration to go back and revise that, because the way the policy is currently written, we cannot display pictures of students when we go to activities and we want to go on Facebook and brag about our premier school district. We will no longer be able to do that. Also, all of my friends, after working in Richland too for 15 years, I can no longer be your friend on Facebook. That is ridiculous. So I would love for you guys to go back and let's use a common sense practice and let's come up with a new policy and send it to us. And if you send it to us in a week, I may still have questions when we come back here. Thank you.
And I think they're accepted whenever you have the question, whether they're beforehand or the board meeting. I think your questions are always, I think no one's restricting anything, either beforehand or at the board meeting. Our questions or comments, I think, are always received, and I appreciate that. Dr. Caution Parker.
In working with these policies, one issue with the social media, and I dealt with it 16 years, parents getting upset when they go on Facebook or something like some social media entity and see their child's picture and they did not give permission. Mm-hmm. And then on the other side, you have parents who do not mind the children's pictures being shown on there. So I think we have to be very, very careful about that and about the Privacy Act and the law that goes along with that. So as you're working on the policy, I think you probably need to get some legal advice as well.
Thank you, Dr. Caution Parker.
Because all of it's based on federal law and regulations and state law, all these policies.
Thank you, Dr. Caution Parker. Is it safe to move on to item 13.3, proposal policy revisions to GBEF, cellular phones and other personal electronic communication devices? This is a new policy. Are there any questions or comments or concerns from board members? Hearing none, moving right along to policy revisions to GB, staff personal security and safety, which is also a new policy.
Madam Chair.
Mrs. Agostini.
Sorry, it wasn't pulling up. I'm concerned about the order in which something happens. For the first bullet point, it states that, I'll just start reading from the very beginning. Through its overall safety program and policies, the district seeks to provide the safest possible working environment for all employees. Should an employee be subject to assault, harassment, damage to personal property, or any other harm or threat or harm on school premises or in the scope of his or her employment, the incident should be addressed as follows. First one, the teacher or employee should immediately notify his or her principal or supervisor, who will report the incident to the superintendent. Number two, if necessary, the superintendent or his or his designee will report the incident to the designated local law enforcement. I'm just concerned, if a teacher is assaulted, why are we going to the superintendent first? I would think that would be an immediate need. And why don't we give the principal or somebody leeway to call local officials to take care of the problem?
I don't think the bullets represent a specific order. It just identifies these are steps that should be taken, but there's no specific order to that because of the bullets.
It says the incident should be addressed as follows. To me, that seems like it's an order of how the event should occur.
That's not the intent. The intent is just to provide clarification of steps that should be taken. The discretion will be used at the school level based on the incident that would occur. So therefore, for example, if there's an assault on the school grounds and a resource officer is there, I'm very confident that the principal or the teacher will report the incident immediately to the SRO on campus, and then the superintendent will be notified of the incident. So this is just a recommendation. These are just steps that should be taken, but it doesn't designate a specific order.
Which is why they're not numbered. They're bullets as opposed to being numbered. Dr. Davis.
That's correct.
Additional questions or concerns with regard to policy GB? If not, board members will move on to policy revisions to GCB, professional staff contracts and compensation, which is also a new policy. If there are no questions or concerns from board members, we'll move on to policy revisions to G, C, F, B, hiring of administrative staff, rescinding. Dr. Elkins Johnson.
Just a question. I know you guys rescinded this policy and just not sure why.
It will currently be found in evaluation of administrative staff, which is reflected in policy GCO, evaluation of administrative staff.
So it will come later?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Elkins Johnson. And Mrs. Williams, are there any questions or concerns additionally with regard to this rescission? If not, we're moving on to policy revisions to G, C, R, non-school employment of professional staff. Questions or concerns from board members?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Agostini.
I have a question with the last line, and it's based upon a policy that's pending that we moved to the Faculty Advisory Committee. It says, further, an employee may not use any district facilities, equipment, or materials in performing outside work. And if we are going to consider allowing a teacher to tutor students in our schools, then I think this would contradict that policy.
Is there a recommendation, Mrs. Agostini, or are you just wanting a
Well, I guess the recommendation would be waiting for the other policy prior to us approving this policy.
Thank you, Mrs. Agostini. Are there additional questions, concerns regarding this policy, or if at the will of the board? I'm fine with it. Other board members? Silence.
It will table that. I mean, we'll bring that back when we postpone it until we have FAC. I think is scheduled this week as well. So we can add that to the FAC agenda as an item for discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. If there are no further questions or concerns from board members, we have completed this section. Thank you, Ms. Williams. Moving on in our agenda to item 13.8, proposed 2019-2020 budget. Dr. Davis.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Mallett will share information with you this evening regarding the 2019-2020 general fund budget proposal, first reading. Dr. Mallett.
Thank you. I believe that our last briefing updated you on some changes that we had gotten from the county auditor and the State Department in terms of our growth rate and the updated revenue picture. What you have tonight is based on discussions at the administrative level and getting all the information on the revenue side, additional updates from the state government. One cautionary note, the state budget has not been approved in final action yet. So while we think these will be final numbers, the state legislature could still either increase our budget or change our budget. But I'm bringing you tonight for first reading for your consideration, the 2019-2020 general fund budget proposal. And in your document and on our screen up here, what I wanted to start out was refresh your memory in terms of our priorities set by the board and by the employees. And if you look back over this, we shared this with you in our last briefing, the priorities of the board. Adequate funding for increased teacher salaries, safety and security for all facilities, recruitment and retention efforts for teachers, maintain low student-teacher ratio, and you read the rest. Those are priorities by the board, and those are priorities that Dr. Davis and the staff incorporated in the development of the proposed budget that's going to be here tonight, we're presenting to you tonight. We also wanted to share the employee priorities. They're very similar in a lot of ways to the priorities of the board. Again, this was not a surprise usually. Employees rank employee compensation pretty high most of the time, but it also was highly rated by the board as far as a priority. Academic intervention, safety and security, student behavior, student support services, special education, preschool education, arts and CATE, instructional technology. You can see them. So our priorities as directed by you and reflected in our employee surveys, we think that this proposed budget reflects those priorities. And the document tonight that, and I guess a couple of procedural housekeeping things, as you know, we will hopefully have a special call board meeting next Monday night in which if you approve the second reading, we'll take this to county council. County council is having a special call board meeting, special council meeting on the 23rd, which is next week from Thursday. That'll be the second reading at the county level. And then they're having a special call board council meeting on May the 30th, which would be the third reading of the budget at the county level. So that's kind of looking ahead our process if first reading is approved tonight, second reading by you on the 20th, and then proceed to the county. As you see in the revenues, most of these we shared with you last time. There've been a couple of changes. These are the same. This is the same format as our budget every year. The property tax revenues. We told you that the auditor had increased our mill value. Property tax revenues at the local level are projected to increase by a little over 5%. This is assuming a mill increase to the cap of 12.5 mills. As you see, property tax relief from the state. This is Act 388 reimbursing us for the exemption of Act 388 and the homes, the owner-occupied homes that do not pay us any property tax for operating. This is the reimbursement at the state level. It's well below what it should be, but it's increased this year by almost $1 million. That was good news. State revenue for fringe benefits increased by about 5%, by $2 million. That's good. We have a $2 million price tag on the increase in the extra 1% contribution for retirement employer contributions. The others are relatively modest revenue sources other than the EIA transfer for the teacher salary supplement and the state aid to classrooms. Again, we talked about that new name that the state legislature gave to revenues for K through 12. In prior years, that same revenue source, if we'd have been given the same amount of revenues, would have been allocated in the EFA line item. They just created a new category this year. You'll have to ask them why, but they created a new category. But it is additional funding that we're allowed to use for teacher pay raises. The expenditure side is a lot more cumbersome to talk about, but it is in balance. I think what I'd like to do is we can come back to this page. What I'd like to do is go to the line item incremental items included in the budget increase so that you'll get a picture of the primary changes that are included in the budget for your consideration. Starting with the next page, we were informed that the state share of health insurance, we weren't going to have an increase this year, which was good. It's rare, but it's good. The estimated increase in the state share of state retirement, that 1% increase, the 1 percentage point increase in employer contribution. We have one more year of that. It's a $2 million increase to us. Now that's all employees, the employer contribution, that's about $2 million. We don't have discretion, and what I wanted to make sure everybody understands is that some of these line items down the list, the district has some discretion of whether we do them or not. Those first 4 or 5, we have no discretion. They're state mandates mandated by the state government. Our teacher salary schedule and step increase, that's mandated by the state. That's the step increase for all eligible teachers. That's about $2.4 million. We've got the teacher salary schedule raise. That's the 4% that's just been discussed. That's the 4% increase that teachers wanted more than that, but that's what the legislature gave was. So in essence, when a step is, when they're awarded a step, the average increase over the course of a salary schedule is roughly 2%. So they'll have 2% increase in the step when they get a step, and they'll have a 4%. So most teachers will realize about a 6% increase in their salary, which we have had increases in the past that high. We haven't had any increases. This is the 6th budget that I've worked on at the district, and that's the largest increase in teacher salaries that we've had since I've been here. We've also got the all non-teacher salary step increase. This is not mandated by the step, but by the step. This is not mandated by the state, but this is something that since I've been here, the district has tried to do. Whatever the teachers are awarded by, are mandated by the state, the district has tried to give other employees. We know they're valuable, we know they're important, and try to give them the same raise, the same increases. And so non-teacher salary step would cost the district a little over $1 million. We are going to give all employees, non-teacher employees, a step increase. For the administrator's salary increase, we're proposing a 1%. That's a group of employees, principals, assistant principals, administrators on negotiated contracts, and athletic directors. Everyone else in the district would get a step increase and 4% like the teachers. So all employees other than senior management would get a step plus 4, roughly 6%. Senior management would get a step, which is roughly 2%, and a 1%, basically half the raise that all other employees are getting. That was a decision made by the administration. It also was one that also freed up some funds to allow us to recommend some other increases. And also in this budget are contractual service increases. Those are other contracts that we have that we are in our contracts with service providers. We have some of the discretionary line items that are driven by our priorities are the benchmark exams. That's roughly $130,000. Restore funding for external evaluations that were cut in prior years, which was roughly $22,000. An additional hearing officer. The hearing officer workload has increased over time. The staffing at that department has not, so we're recommending a hearing officer, a part-time security position at the schools, after-school activities. The high schools have asked for several years that after school, there's so many students around and not adequate security. They were concerned about safety in after hours in large facilities like the high schools, that there wasn't adequate staff or security available. So we've budgeted increased staff for that security, again, reflecting the priorities of security and safety. In addition, we have those are for part-time security positions. At R2I2, we have some software licenses and drafting materials for new courses. We have an e-sport and summer school for advanced expansion in middle school, summer camp, expansion stipends at, I believe those are also at R2I2? Yes. Thank you. The interventionists in terms of priorities, in terms of helping lower performing students, we've included one FTE for an interventionist at Blythewood Middle School. We've included a mental health therapist, family intervention services, one FTE. We've included an itinerant nurse to cover R2I2, Charter High School, thank you, adult ed, and other schools to increase the availability for the nurses to move around. Increase AVID lead from 190 to 215 days. We have an AVID lead teacher, but they need to increase the number of days because they're going to be on site more than just the 190 days. We have an FTE for student information specialists. That department also has not grown as the district has increased its number of students by probably 10,000 since the last time that department increased any student. If we have any questions, we have people that can provide you additional information. We have an AV technical support for the district, both at the district auditorium, here at our conference center, and throughout the district for AV technical assistance. We're increasing the interventionists, again, Right, if you go back to the priorities, the interventionist, 2 FTEs at elementary schools. We're providing 2 FTEs for psychologists at the elementary level. Carrying on, we have an FTE for a school counselor. We currently have, I believe, we have a part-time counselor at these school sites. Is that correct? Correct. And this would provide more support for those schools, correct? We're proposing the district-wide AVID implementation for $146,000, transportation costs and lab needs for AVID early college summer classes, a half an FTE for an ESOL teacher for a newcomer program at R2I2, 5 special ed teachers, again reflecting the priorities for special ed, 10 special ed teacher aides, assistants, an additional administrator to accommodate growth at Dent. Dent's so large that it's actually off the scale of our staffing standards, and it needs an additional administrator, assistant administrator for its size relative to other middle schools, and then 7 FTEs for teacher growth. We've got an estimated 300 new students coming next year. We're budgeting for 300, and so this 7 FTEs has helped us to keep class size as low as possible. Additional information, I'll be glad to go over this. This is the local revenue derivation. One of the important things, it's very detailed, but one of the most important things is our number is consistent with the number that was sent to us by the auditor. If you remember in several years past, we've gone to the county disagreeing with the auditor, arguing that our numbers are different. We agree with the auditor's number, so we feel like the county should be more acceptable in terms of our projections when the county auditor, we're using the same number as the county auditor for that 158 million of local tax revenues. Now that isn't all property taxes, that it also includes the state reimbursement for Act 388 reimbursement. And the last page is where we calculate Education Finance Act. Again, this is somewhat misleading given that they allocated so many funds to the districts through that new line item. But we're assuming about, if you remember last year, our base student cost last year was $2,485. Through the graciousness of the legislature, it was increased by $2 for this year. So our base student cost went up $2 from last year. Our estimated district weighted pupil units is a little, almost 38,000. Our head count's closer to 28,000, but when we use the weighted pupil units, it's almost 38,000. And this is the derivation to generate our estimated EFA funds, which would, if you go back to page, and I know I'm going to get fired one day for not putting page numbers on, but in the revenue section that is right here, that EFA number of 79 million, third line down, $208,000 is the same number as the derivation of this EFA estimate right here. I know that's a lot. There's a lot of information provided. I'll be glad to answer any questions. I have asked everyone who knows more about their departments and their needs than I do to be glad to be here tonight. And if you have a specific question about a specific line item, I'll be glad to direct that question to whomever we need to talk to.
I think we have a bevy of questions. Thank you, of course, first of all, for your transparency and presenting the report. I have some questions that I've asked beforehand already, but one that I do have, just to put on record, what is the historical increase of the base student cost?
Last year, we got $65 increase in base student cost. We're still about $500 below the state law that dictates the base student what it should be. As you know, they pass a proviso every year that exempts them from the state law. We've had increases since I've been here as much as 120, I believe, 125. We've also had increases as low as 45. The governor had recommended $10 increased base student costs. Molly Spearman had asked for $162 increase in base student costs. As you know, the Ways and Means in the House recommended a $0 increase in base student costs. So it's varied often over the last 6 years. One of the problems is that even though it's $2 above, and we've had increases in various years, they've actually taken away other revenue sources than EIA funds. Like, for instance, we're losing about $400,000 for tech support this year. That actually could factor into that would probably be a lower base student cost if you factored in the loss of other revenues.
So is it fair to say that if the base student costs were funded at the appropriate levels that state law indicates they should be, would that cure a lot of our ills?
I believe the last estimate was about $19 million. If the state funded the base student cost at its current level, at its proposed appropriate level, yes, according to state law, we would receive about $19 million above this current estimate.
Cure
Yes,
a lot of
ma'am.
bills. And I see a lot of hands up for board members, so I'm just going to start at the end. And if you don't have a question, that's fine. Dr. Holmes, what's your hand up? I saw a lot of hands up at one time. Mr. Manning?
Yeah,
I'll get you, Doctor.
Dr. Miley, a couple things. One, I really like the way you did the board process this year, sort of the cumulative score to look at priorities and the way you folded that in with the district priorities. I think this budget certainly reflects those priorities appropriately. And if we look at even SE for Ed, one of the things that really strikes me is how teachers are asking for support in the classroom with mental health needs, and this budget reflects an increase in staff to help address some of those. Certainly, we're not fixing it all with this, but we are making an attempt to improve on that and salaries. And on the salary front, I really applaud you all for the decision to differently compensate some of our contract employees versus some of our others. The sacrifice y'all are making in order for us to further address some of those needs that we have in the classroom, I think is very admirable. And I really appreciate that sacrifice that this being made at that level. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And of course, I don't set priorities. We're just reporting those. So I think Dr. Davis and the senior staff are to be commended on their efforts to make sure that this budget reflects those priorities. And I believe it was Dr. Davis who suggested accumulating those board priorities and trying to come up with some measure also. So I don't want to take credit for it, but I think it's very informative and helpful, and I'm glad we did, and we'll do it in future years as well.
That's right. Y'all were doing the work. You may have had the idea. Y'all did all the effort. So I'll give it to you anyways. Sorry, Dr. Davis.
But
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bain. Dr. Caution Parker, did I see your hand? Dr. Elkins Johnson, thank you.
Yes, I have a few questions. First, I want to go back to the base student costs. Although we have not received a huge increase, I want to put it on the record that Richland 2 is still in good shape. I know we try to put this fear out there because we're not getting the money that we want, but we need to know that we're still in good shape. Although we could utilize the extra funding, don't get me wrong, but I don't want to place any fear out there that Richland 2 is struggling and we're going through difficult times, because we are not. Richland 2 is in very good hands and in good shape. So I want to just remove that fear if you feel it, because I feel the fear sometimes when they get up here and they speak. We're not in that shape like some other districts. So I want to put that on the record. And a few questions. I want to go back to some of the line items. And I know previously you used to give us different outlines of no meal, then half price of the meal, and then 12.6 is the cap. I noticed this year we only received the no meal and 12.6. So it would have been nice to go back and give us 3 different options like we've normally had in the past. The other question is, I want to just go through a few line items. One is administrative fee for well, let me remove that one. Let me start here with the additional hearing officer. I know we stated that we need to use $100,518 for an additional hearing officer. could we not find someone who could do this part-time where we don't have to spend as much money for a full-time hearing officer? And then two, I don't know what job descriptions are because that's not my place to know. That's Dr. Davis because they work for Dr. Davis and he works for us. But I'm just wondering, Mr. Smith, can he not take on some cases or does he actually take on hearing cases? And then I'll move to my other questions.
If it's the will of the board, we can look at a part-time hearing officer. The reason why we put the FTE in there is when you look at in the comparison of other districts our sizes. Some districts outside, matter of fact, even smaller than us, have 3 hearing officers. And their load is not as high as our load, but right now we are having, Ms. Chisholm is doing the majority of the hearings because of other obligations with discipline that I'm working with, MTSS, as well as some legal cases. So that has cut into the amount of time that hearings have been conducted by me. But again, we're trying to go ahead and make sure we get the hearings in time, in a timely manner, and get them resolved where either the students are back in school or if they're coming up to appeal to you where we can get them back in school. That's what we're working toward.
And I appreciate that, but in a time that we're saying that we're reducing expulsion hearings, I'm wondering why if we're reducing expulsion hearings, we're trying to hire an additional hearing officer. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me, but again, it's always at the will of the board, but that's just not very useful of the funds if we're doing reductions. But
we are reducing the number of, and you will see this in a few minutes when I get ready to do the presentation about expulsions. Expulsion numbers have gone down, but at the same time, we have had more hearings conducted based on our discipline matrix and based on the infractions that come towards you. There, in the first, from August to February, we increased the number of hearings by 100 based on infractions that students come. You see the ones that we uphold that come to you for appeals, but there are still a lot of issues that come otherwise, and we try our best to go ahead and get those students back in. If they don't make it to the level where we need to uphold expulsion, we do go ahead and get them back in, but every day there are several different issues that come up. And again, I think with the mental health councils and other things we're doing, the more we do with interventions, the better we're getting there. But that's one of the reasons.
Okay, so right now, Mrs. Chisholm is the only full-time hearing officer.
Correct.
And we don't have you assisting on a part-time level? It's just Mrs. Chisholm?
I would do a hearing when time permits in the schedule, but with duties and all, there are a lot of other things that I have not been able to do a lot of hearings.
Okay, I'll move on and talk with Dr. Davis a little later. The next question is increase AVID lead of $8,413. If you can explain that for me.
And I will be glad to have, Mary Page will help us understand that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. The AVID lead teacher at Ridgeview High School, the program that he is running with the early college, they are about to have their first summer of 2 college classes this summer, and he will have to be on campus with them all day, each day of that summer session. So we will need to increase his number of days.
Okay, that leads to the next question. Year 1 district-wide AVID for $146,000.
Yes, ma'am. That is the money to bring on the new elementary schools that are coming on for next year to pay for their site licenses, their libraries, their training, et cetera.
So how many schools?
We will be bringing on 7 new schools.
And how were the 7 selected out of 20?
They self-selected.
So back to SICE management. And I know you guys have an AVID conference coming up, and I know I've discussed that with the two of you, and I may be interested in attending that because I'm just curious. We have 20 elementary schools, but only 7 are going to be a part of this.
No, ma'am, we've already have close to 10. So we're actually just bringing on roughly half of the schools that are yet to come on.
Okay, thank you. And line item interventionist for Blythewood Middle School. Do we have an interventionist at all of the middle schools? Okay.
Dr. Suber is going to help me explain that.
Yes, ma'am.
So we do have one at all of the elementary schools?
All of them.
So we just needed to add Blythewood to be?
It's the last one, yes.
Last one. Okay, the elementary schools, I see that we have 2 more that we want to add. Do we have one at every elementary school?
Not yet.
So how did we decide these 2?
Based off of need, based off of student data, based off of SE ready results, based off of map data.
So based off all the things that you mentioned, only 2 schools needed additional, or is it because we don't have the funds per se?
Yes. It's been incremental throughout the years. So we've added 2 each year based off of need.
Okay, next question, transportation costs and lab needs for AVID. I think that will go back to
Yes.
early college summer classes. That says 8,500, but I know you just talked about the increased AVID lead, so that's really 16,000.
The money for transportation and the lab fees was considered separately. That is a district program. We have students that live all over the district who will need to get to Ridgeview High School this summer. And we will be offering a college biology experience, and there will be lab supplies that we do not normally have for our high school students.
Okay, and speaking of, that's not here, but I'll just add this on, had an opportunity to go to a Mother's Day program for Pathways to something, promotion. And I know that, I see that we are including funds for the AVID program, but I heard some of the folks get up there and speak that they had 12 students who could have been interested in that program, but because of transportation, some of them could not make it. So I'm just wondering, how can we provide transportation for AVID, but we couldn't provide transportation for those other students who could not be a part of that pathway to promotion? And I know some of the students, Dr. Davis, did not want to be a part of it, but I'm not concerned about those students. I'm talking about the students that was shared that they wanted to be a part of it, and they could not afford transportation. So I know the piece about not all of them wanted to be. I get that. I am talking about the few, just the bare minimum, that wanted to be a part, but we could not provide transportation for them. So why don't I see that as part of the funding?
We could, well, I can try to attempt to address that. One, that it's a pilot program at this moment. And so we selected a group of students, so I have an opportunity for a selected group of students to participate. And typically when we start out in a pilot, we do not necessarily put those funds in to be able to address that. Secondly, these are students who technically have been expelled from school, and that expulsion has been upheld. We don't provide transportation to the students who are sent to Blythewood Academy at this moment. So if we decided to do that, then we would probably then have to revisit whether or not we're providing transportation for students we have not expelled but have reassigned to our alternative school program.
Okay, and my last question, I think, it's at the part-time security officers for the after-school programs. Is that for all of the high schools or certain high schools?
All the high schools.
All of the high schools. So why are we only adding 2.5?
I believe that's what they asked for, but secondly,
it's not 2 point, but it's half-time positions.
yeah, part-time people.
So it's part-time people.
So it's part-time people. And what are these hours? Because I'm thinking, it's my understanding that students can't be on campus and not being supervised. So why do we need security if we have the coaches there who are supervising, or if we have the club members who are there supervising. So why do we still need the security there? Because I thought we already paid for security to drive around our schools and our campuses already.
I'll address that, Dr. Eccles Johnson.
Okay.
So last year, we reassigned our security officers, if you may remember, till we had 8 full-time staff that worked first and second and third shift.
Right.
Now we have 3 officers who are district officers that work in those different shifts.
Okay.
The first shift officers work an 8-hour first shift, so that because it's typically 7 to 3 or 7:30 to 3:30. And so those, we don't have the resources of the high schools used to have a base person before we went to the new plan to cover the elementary schools where that high school person worked out of the base. And so now at from the high schools, what's occurring is there's kids everywhere, and they want a presence there to at least be a deterrence to help with those situations. The high schools have worked on some supervision, and Mr. Price can maybe help help supervise those kids during those times, but they've requested to have an additional security presence during those 4 hours. So that's what they want. Mr. Price can maybe help answer the questions, but the reason is because we took those officers and put them in elementary school, so we don't have the resources to have those in the afternoon. And it's only a half-time position, so it's basically from 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock, Monday through Friday.
So we have activities that go on inside of the school from 4 to 8?
Yes, ma'am, we do. We have activities that go on inside the school. We had activities that go on behind the school. And we have some nights where we don't have any activities, but we still have students there until 8 o'clock because they haven't been picked up yet or they haven't left campus.
So what's our policy that we already have in place that students have to be off campus at a certain time and we contact parents?
I don't know that there is a policy that says a student has to vacate the campus at a certain time.
We deal with a lot of practices, I'm sorry.
But they're there. And right now, we don't have staff that are always there until 8 o'clock. When we had before, we had a security guard that was based at each of the 5 high schools, so that they provided that supervision in the main office area, in the atrium area, in the front area of the school, so that they could supervise students until they're picked up. And so without that person there, our staff has got to stay there until 8 o'clock at night, which is beyond their expectations. And when we've got events there, like people who are there for athletes who are there for practice, they're supervised by their coach.
Right.
Those who are there for tutoring are supervised by their tutor.
Right.
Those who are there for dance are supervised by their dance teacher.
Right.
But then there are those who are not there for any of those things, but they're there until 8 o'clock at night. And so to have someone there that is supervising and providing supervision and limiting access to other parts of the building, that's what the security guards were doing before. And now we don't have that. So that's why the high school principals are asking for that piece of the day to be reestablished again.
And I can support that, but I still like for you guys to go back and take a look at that, because it's our job to make sure that if those students are not part of a program, that they're not just lingering around the school. So we're going to have to do a better job of making sure that we escort students where they need to be.
I think that's a great point, Dr. Eccles Johnson. I believe the security officers will allow us to do that even more efficiently. It's difficult to be able to do those things when administrators and staff are already assigned to a specific location, supervising the students that they're already with. We've heard from our high school principals. We've also heard from our high school, from our teachers as well, about the ability to be able to securely supervise the building. I think we should be careful of saying that they are providing supervisions for those students. They are not. They're covering the school to ensure that no one is entering areas that they should not be entering, any unauthorized personnel that is on campus, while those individuals are already allocated to students that are maybe assigned to their specific location, so they give them the opportunity to do that. This time of the year specifically, if you have an opportunity during spring sports, it is quite busy on our school campuses, and there are multiple things that are going on, and many administrators are stretched to cover all the events. And so it allows us to have appropriate supervision. We have teachers who may be staying after school late, working on different projects or assignments, and that their sense of security was high on the list for teachers. It was also high on the list for the board, and this was an opportunity for us to give some of that security back because we had to reallocate security to address the shortage that we had at the elementary level. So this was our attempt to be able to do that, to accommodate the request of the priorities of the board as well as the priorities of our staff.
Thank you so much. I think those are all the questions I have right now. The other questions I'll talk with Dr. Davis later. And just a comment. I know as we're talking about the budget and how much money we're going to ask county council, I would love for you to go back and see how we can pay our certified and classified staff a $1,000 bonus at the end of this school year. And I'll come back and later make a motion on that, because I know we can find funds and I know we have the funds. So I would like to see that we give every employee, certified and classified, a $1,000 bonus, end of the school year, this school year bonus. Thank you.
Mr. Shad.
Thank you, Dr. Molly, for the report. And I understand that we all have priorities. And because you have priorities, that means that everyone won't be able to, quote unquote, make the cut. And I applaud the administration in supporting our teachers, not only from the and other employees with what the state told us to give them, the 4% and the step, and to track that we've done that with the other employees as well. So I definitely appreciate that. So you've hit the mark. You all have hit the mark with regard to our support from a financial standpoint, and then other areas too, to support our teachers in the classroom and, of course, support the students. I will just say that I have a concern, and I know Mr. Smith has given some information, and I know we're going to hear from him soon on discipline, but I have a concern that we do not expect to hire anyone with regard to discipline on a proactive basis in terms of our BEST program. I understand we're going to hear something from, and I've already said that I'm going to talk offline about that, so that we can do things so that we don't have, from what I'm hearing, a larger workload for Ms. Chisholm, to the point that we are now talking about a $100,000 job for an additional hearing officer. And what I heard from Mr. Smith was that there's been an increase for 5 months, August to February, of 100 more hearings. Now, as a board, we don't get all of them, of course, because apparently Ms. Chisholm is either deciding to deny the recommendation and come up with something else to keep the child in school. So we don't even get that unless we get an appeal for Blythewood Academy or something. So we're not getting that much. We're telling the public that, based on the discipline matrix and addressing certain things, that the numbers are down. I keep hearing the numbers are down, the numbers are down. I'm hearing now that there's a need for an additional hearing officer at $100,000 to assist Ms. Chisholm. And what I wasn't a mathematician, but I'm hearing 100 hearings in 5 months. That's 20 per month. That's 4 a week extra for what she has. So we're talking about assisting her on the back end after the child has evidently been accused of doing something that requires a recommendation for expulsion. So not only, I'm just saying this in terms of the budget, but I'm definitely looking forward to hearing from the report as to what the numbers are, because, again, it just doesn't seem like, what comes to mind is fidelity. If we're talking about addressing from a financial standpoint, hiring a full-time hearing officer to address apparently an increase in expulsions, yet I think we're going to hear that expulsions are going down. And I don't know if that's for Dr. Davis, for Dr. Miley, for Mr. Smith, But please help me out with that.
I think
And again, I know that the priorities are what they are, and I agree with a very good bit of them, especially with our growth. But this, for right now, this expenditure list I didn't see anywhere where we're talking about expanding BEST by making sure we have more interventions in it so we can try to catch them on the front end in this multi-tiered thing, which is also mandated by the state.
Thank you, Mr. Shad. I think looking at it from this perspective, my response to your question would be, if you take a historical look back at our school district, I think I can remember some time when our school district was probably, I don't think I was in the district, but I realized at some point our school district was probably 15,000 students. And I believe we had one hearing officer. And we're now pushing 30,000 students. We are projected to be at 50,000 students by 2035. At some point, we have to make some decision on how to alleviate some of that. As we are attempting to reduce, there are multiple approaches that we're taking to reduce infractions in our classrooms. However, those infractions are still happening. We've done a good job in focusing on reducing recommendations for expulsions and suspensions and those things. And one of the things about data, of course, it will fluctuate, it will go up and down, and there will be an ebb and flow. And so we try to capitalize that data from a longitudinal perspective to see how we're performing over a 3 to 5 year period. But having an additional hearing officer will allow us to get those students, from my perspective, returned back to their classrooms in a timely manner. Not necessarily looking at it as a situation of referring more students to the board for review of whether or not to uphold or to deny an appeal, but more so to see those students in a timely manner to reduce the number of instructional days that they are missing, to get them back into their schools and back into their classrooms for some of the infractions that have occurred. And so I think the district has been long positioned or overdue for many positions for a district our size at 28,500 students. A hearing officer, one additional hearing officer is just that. The total that has been allocated to this budget as $100,000 does include the fringe. So I don't want it to appear as if it's a $100,000 job. That includes fringe and benefits as well. Yes, ma'am. So all positions, when you look at them for position-wise, includes the fringe and benefits. So that's just not an allocated $100,000 position for those students. In this attempt for this budget, one of the things that the board would see that we've made a very concerted effort to address social emotional well-being, a very concerted effort to address safety and security, a concerted effort to address teaching and learning, curriculum instruction. Those have been the focuses for this budget. And so providing things like a school counselor for CFK, CF North, CFA, and CFI. It's long overdue to have a counselor. When you combine those schools are as large as an elementary school. However, they only had a half a counselor. Again, that's not addressing the social emotional needs of those students. To address the social emotional needs of the students, when we were looking at things as adding a Spanish speaking, I think it's a social worker or interventionist, but a Spanish-speaking interventionist. Again, we are a growing school district we're pushing now about 10%, almost 11% of our students who are Spanish-speaking or ESL students. And so there's a myriad of needs, including additional special education FTEs and special education aides. Many of the behavior issues that we're dealing with that are coming to the board for hearings, many of them are connected to students who have some social emotional needs. And so this will give us an opportunity to disseminate and get through those things in a timely manner and get those students the appropriate help that they need. But you're absolutely right. We would have loved to address the needs. We had over $30 million worth of requests, and we've whittled that request down to roughly about $16 million. I would venture to say the vast majority of those requests were items that were needed.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Mr. Shad.
And not to elicit fear, but definitely hope for frustration. If the base student cost had been according to state law with that additional $19 million, I would think you would agree, Dr. Davis, that we would have met that $30 million request. But because of the priorities, $19 million is not there. So we can't address all of those priorities, which would have included the BEST program.
Amen.
Mrs. Agostini.
Thank you. Well, my colleagues have been very thorough with their questioning. Just one quick question. Where in this line item is it indicated that the senior administrators get the 2% increase? Where would I find that?
On a line item, unfortunately, it's the $239,000, 1 to 6th line down.
That says 1% increase.
That's right. The step increase is the non-teacher salary step increase includes everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thanks.
Sorry, should have made that a little clearer, but that's.
Dr. Wilkins-Johnson, are you?
Okay.
Just one other question. I know that Dent Middle School is going to get an assistant administrator for their growth. How many AAs do we have at that school already?
We have 0 AAs at Dent right now.
Okay, do we have any AAs at any of the middle schools? So are we considering that?
Again, I think it's because of their Dent size, I believe. It's the largest middle school.
Right, but do the other schools not need an additional assistant at the middle school level?
If they exceed the staffing standard, right now, all the other middle schools are staffed appropriately according to the staffing standards. So since Dent has grown, they have grown outside of our staffing standards. So this is our way of providing them with additional support without going to an assistant principal.
Okay, I
level.
just wanted to make sure that we're fair, and if the other middle schools
Yes,
need
ma'am.
one as well, that we include that, because we do have the funding, because we're not in a budget crisis. I'm still going to say that because I don't want people to think Richland 2 is in a budget crisis. We are not. There are things that we need and there are things that we want. So we do have all the things we need, and we're adding some things that we want. So Richland 2 is not in a budget crisis.
Questions or concerns from board members? And just to reiterate, as we're advocating, I know that May 1st was an all-out day, and teachers advocated for what they should have on that day. But as people are talking to their legislators and asking questions and writing letters and making telephone calls, be sure that the single most thing that we can do to have all of our wants met and our needs and our desires, every category, is to ask that the base student cost be funded at its appropriate level. It's not a suggestion, it's the law. It's the law. It's not. And with regard to unfunded mandates, as the legislature passes on mandates to us, that we ask that they be funded so that we are not having to shoulder the burden of mandates that are not provided to us. But we are blessed not to be in the news with our doors closing or anything of that nature. But there are the things that we need. And if the base student cost were fully funded as directed by the law and not a proviso that allows them to circumvent that every year, it would free us up tremendously. It would be a blessing.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
Mr. Shad.
Since you said that, Dr. Miley, what level are we at now? Which year
The
for the base student cost?
2487, 2,487.
Right, but what year would that be? I know we've heard that question before. Like, are we in like 2007 level or 2012
That's
level?
about $5, I think, about $5 above what it was in 2009. Yes, sir. It's roughly
10 years ago.
10 years ago. It's basically the level 10 years ago. So we're what, $11 above what it was a decade ago? Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Miley.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate.
We do need a first reading motion from you tonight, so we would appreciate it and appreciate your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Wait,
Miley.
before we
Moving on
make a
to-
motion, are we going to see if we can have different outlooks on the budget? So if we have to go back and make any changes, we know which changes we need to do, or is this the final?
Well, this will be first reading, and you can make changes in the second reading. But we hope that.
So we only going to get it at 12 mil, the cap?
Is about roughly 300 grand. So if you want to say 5 mils, you can take that off of that total that's projected on it. So for every mil you would decrease that,
Right, but I know before you guys would give it to us 0, maybe 5, 6, and then 12, and we didn't get that this year. So I'm just wondering why.
One of the reasons why, because at the 0 mil increase, we pretty much would not have been able to do anything. With the amount of mandates for the 4% step for our teachers and for our certified staff, we would not have been able to do anything. I don't think we would have been able to fully fund the mandates at a 0% mill. So we felt like it was not worth having a 0 mill presented to the board.
Ever since I've been on the board, we've gotten a 0, a 5 or 6, and then the cap. So it is feasible to do that, and I would like to see it.
That's up, we'll.
Again, we're talking about needs and wants.
Yes, ma'am.
So I would like to be able to make a sound decision with different options placed in front of me like we've done in the past. I know that's like we normally say. Well, that's the way we used to do it. So I'm saying that's the way we used to do it. So I would love to have some options.
Yeah.
Again, we'll still need, if we're
Is that
going
a
to
motion,
meet
is
our-
that a motion, Dr. Elkins Johnson, that you have the 0 mil option included with the other options? Is that a motion,
Yes,
Dr. Elkins Johnson?
we're dealing with taxpayers' money, and I want to be able to justify why I decided to go with the cap, or why I decided to vote on 0, or why did I decide to vote on 6.5. So this is the taxpayers' money that we are talking about.
We'll still need, if, to meet our goal of getting it to county council, we'll still need a first reading tonight, so that we can move forward on Monday night, the 20th, for second reading, whatever version we take, but we'll still need a first reading tonight. So I do ask you to give first reading tonight, and then if we make edits and changes, we'll be glad to do that for second reading.
So, it's not an action item. What you're asking is that,
Oh. No, it's, okay, thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm glad I was corrected. Thank you. As I was saying, I don't need first reading tonight as a motion, and I appreciate your patience. And if that's all.
thank you, Dr. Miley.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Moving on to item 13.9, a report on discipline. Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, members of the board, we have Mr. Cleveland Smith to give you the discipline report. Mr. Smith.
Good evening, Madam Chair, board members, and Dr. Davis.
Good evening.
At this late hour, I'm going to do my best to be brief. With this report here, what I want to share with you this evening, I'm going to show you some data with suspensions as well as expulsions, share with you a video about best applied, and also I want to, at the end, show you a draft of the district's discipline philosophy, which we promise we'll bring back to you this year, and want to do that at today. The first slide I have there is the number of students who received in-school suspensions, and I'm comparing 17-18 numbers to the third quarter of 18-19. As you can see there, the numbers, especially at high school, those numbers decrease. They decreased by a number of 121. Our elementary numbers went up by about 6, but overall district compared to last year, third quarter, to this year, in-school suspensions numbers went down by 117. The next slide I want to share with you are the number of instances of in-school. These were the total number of in-school suspensions. Again, elementary went up by a little bit by 10, but again, our high school numbers for in-school suspensions, actual suspensions, they decreased by almost 200, by 197, and on the whole, the district decreased by 153. This slide here gives you the percentage of those times there, and as I'm just going to
look at the District 1, we went down between last year at the third quarter and this year by 5%. That's the number of in-school suspension comparison during those quarters. Now, the number of students with out-of-school suspensions, 17-18 third quarter compared to 18-19 third quarter. At our elementary, we went up by 11. Our middle, we went down by 20 students. And our high schools went up by 51 students. So total across the district, the number of out-of-school suspensions, they did go up. They went up by 47. No, they didn't go up by 47, I'm sorry. They went up by exactly 42. The number of instances, these are how many actual out-of-school suspensions we had between those 2 years. You see again that middle school numbers went down, elementary and high went up slightly. Total for the district, we went up by, increased by 47 during that time. And this slide gives the percentage of out-of-school suspensions doing compared third quarter 17-18 compared to 18-19. When we talk about expulsions, comparing third quarter 17-18 to third quarter 18-19, those numbers did go down. We went down by 9 students. So 9 less students were expelled during those 2 time periods. At this time, I want to share with you a video with Best Applied. The technology is coming slowly.
It's early morning in Richland School District 2.
This is my favorite part of the day because I have an opportunity to meet my parents and the students and help the students to start their day off on the right foot. We want our students to know that we see them, that we know they're here, and that we value them being here.
Paula China is the principal of L.W. Condor Arts Integrated Magnet School.
We currently have about 560 students. We are a Title I school. We have about maybe 55% African American, 35% Latino, and we have a very diverse population.
560 students could be considered a reasonable population for a Richland 2 elementary school, but that was not always the case at Condor.
Prior to us implementing BEST school-wide, we did have hired a high number of suspensions, but that particular year, I will let you know that we had almost 900 students in the building, and then we had a lot of new students coming into the school, as well as new teachers. And I think for us that year, what we realized was common language. Having a common language for the students and the teachers was something that we really, really needed. And so that's why we implemented BEST framework here at Condor. So number one, we have school-wide expectations. So all of our students know what's expected of them. And as far as the teachers, the faculty and staff, making sure that they are aware of what we expect from our students and that we're all, again, saying the same language.
China referenced the implementation of a framework called BEST.
BEST stands for Behavior, Education, Supports, and Training. And it's our version of a multi-tiered system of supports. And what a multi-tiered system of supports does is help schools align what interventions they already have in place and help identify what other interventions that they could use to help with student behavior.
Brent Jerome is one of 3 behavior interventionists that includes Dana Henderson and Dinah Taylor, currently employed by Richland 2.
What we all all have a little bit different backgrounds. I come from a high school teaching background. Dana comes from a special ed background, as well as Dinah, who also has a counseling background. All three of us bring similar skills to the table, but also provide different pieces that help drive us to move these initiatives forward. What we're trying to do is really push a restorative mindset to our staff. We want to be working with these students. A lot of times, academically, we push collaboration. But when it comes to behavior, it's often do what I tell you. And those things run counter to each other. So we really try to get staffs to take the mindset of we want to work with these students instead of just doing punitive things to them. So sure, there may need to be punitive consequences, but with that, we want to have restorative actions with those punitive consequences if need be.
An example of a restorative action is the restorative circle.
Well, students have been brought up in a collaborative mindset since kindergarten, and students love to talk. We all know that. So what we're doing is providing an opportunity for students to talk in a controlled setting. So whether you look at a restorative circle or restorative questioning, students want to talk, share their side of the story, and share their opinion. So we're allowing for that. And it helps teachers better understand your students and get a better understanding of the best way to approach a student to provide them with skills and to try to help improve their behavior.
This particular circle that meets once a week consists of Jerome, a teacher, and another layer called an administrative monitor, Gerald Richardson.
This position is important because we like the buffer for these kids and some of the teachers. You really don't know what a child is going through when they leave home, and then when they come in, and it just depends on how you interact with them, how you talk to them will trigger them to go off. And then with us being in place here as administrative monitors, we can sit down and talk to the student and find what's going on, what's causing this problem. Let's come up with a solution so we can work through it, so we can get you back in the classroom.
The term trigger Richardson uses refers to an intense reaction to an event or a conversation. It can happen to anyone. One of the tasks of the behavior interventionist is to help staff understand and identify triggers that impact the students as well as the staff.
We have to know, because we're all human, that we have emotions, that sometimes, it's that we have to stop and realize when this could be a situation that could engage, us in a power struggle with a student because it's something that's very personal to us. And a lot of times as educators, we have to really kind of, it's hard to leave our emotions at the door, but a lot of times we have to do that because we are the professionals and realizing that we're dealing with students who might have adverse childhood experiences and traumas. And so a lot of our PD focuses on, having that awareness and providing the skills on how do we realize when our triggers have been pushed and how do we support children who their triggers have been sparked.
The fact of the matter is, students are going to misbehave from time to time. The idea is, how can we help them so that they don't misbehave again or repeatedly? So by providing those interventions and those strategies to teachers, that can help them.
Another PD, or professional development, is to repurpose the in-school suspension, or ISS.
We'll be working with hall monitors, assistant principals, and what is traditionally the ISS coordinators into how to reform your in-school suspensions into what we call refocus rooms. So instead of going into a room and sitting all day and doing work, what else can we give these students to help them improve their behavior? So we're looking at ways to implement restorative practices in those rooms by having the students answer or fill out responses to some restorative questioning. So again, what happened? Who did it affect and how? What could you have done differently? How can you repair the harm? Those are the things we want the students to be thinking about so that, again, they don't reoffend. The whole school has to adopt the same mindset. And it starts from the top down. And when everybody's on board with the idea that we need to work with our students instead of doing things to students, you start to see a lot of improvement with behavior with individual students.
Back at Condor, where BEST has been implemented, Principal Paula China has seen an improvement that has moved the school in a positive direction with custom applications that are working for Condor.
It has worked because First of all, from the teacher's perspective, it helps the teachers to realize when a child does something, it's not an automatic referral and send the child to the office. It's, first of all, let me maybe get someone to come in and talk with you. Maybe it's a guidance counselor. Maybe it's an administrator. Maybe it's a behavior interventionist. But to come in and to talk to the student about his or her actions and then find out, it's almost like press a reset button and figuring out what can they do to move forward. Yes, I made a mistake. It was a poor choice, but now let me learn from that so I don't make that same choice over again. So that's been very, very helpful, even in terms of suspensions, like just not automatically suspending a student for something that they may have done. Calling the parent and say, you know what, I really want Johnny to stay in school. He needs to stay in school, but instead of suspending him, we would like for you to come in and let's do a reverse suspension. And so the parents will come in, they'll go to the child's classroom and shadow the child for maybe 15, 30 minutes, depending on the child and depending on the incident. And then after that, then bringing them all to the office or to a designated area to discuss what happened and to say, okay, you know what, we made a poor choice, but now we know what we can do moving forward. Let's move forward and be successful. So it has been something that we have worked on over the last 2 years. We still have to grow in that area, but again, our goal is to teach our students. We can't just, when a child makes a poor choice, just automatically punish the child. We have to have a conversation with them. We have to help them to begin that thought process of reflecting on what they're doing. Now, when you look at our suspension rate as compared to a couple of years ago, it has decreased, and that is in part because, number one, we're focusing a lot on relationships. A lot of what's best is looking at tier one. What are we doing in our classroom for tier one as it relates to behavior? And the first thing, it starts with the relationships.
It is the fostering of those relationships that constitutes the start of every day.
Good morning.
At L.W. Condor Arts Integrated Magnet School.
Okay. Also, I want to go ahead and show and share with you the discipline philosophy that we came up with. Earlier this year, I told you we were bringing a group together to revisit discipline. We had several meetings. We included our community partners, teachers, administrators, and we worked on this. And this is, as well as our behavior intervention specialists. And this is the draft of philosophy we came up with. As you can see, Richland School District 2 believes learning is the cornerstone of student success, and the purpose of student discipline is to teach our students positive behaviors rooted in Richland School District 2's 4 squares for success: learning, character, community, and joy. In order to teach positive behavior effectively, all Richland School District 2 staff members and community partners collectively must believe in all students' ability to succeed in pursuit of their pathway to purpose, implement restorative practices to build, mend, and strengthen relationships, integrate best practices for academic and behavior supports for students, implement the discipline philosophy guidelines and recommendations with fidelity within Richland School District 2, our multi-tier system of supports, and our MTS system of support in Richland 2 framework for behavior is our best model, which is behavior, education, supports, and training. And that's what our draft recommendation for our philosophy is. At this time, I entertain any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Dr. Elkins-Johnson, and then Dr. Holmes.
I'm going to be really brief because I didn't realize it's almost 10 o'clock. I was wondering why I'm about to fall asleep up here. That's why it's past my bedtime. But just briefly, the BEST program, I'm a little confused because watching the video, it looked like you guys talked a lot of the restorative practices language, and you use the circles. And I know this because I'm a national restorative practice trainer.
Right.
And everything I saw in that video was restorative practices. So help me understand what is best and what you're doing, because everything you showed me is what I train, restorative practices. Okay. The language you use, the conversations you had, the circles up there, that's restorative practices all day and all night long. So tell me what is best. And then also, with this restorative practices training, because basically that's what you guys did, are the faculty and staff trained, or are you taking a few trainers from the district and then going into the school and now calling it restorative practices? Because if so, that's so wrong. And that's not how restorative practices is used effectively. So if you're using it in the school, my question is the principal, administrative staff, and their teachers trained in restorative practices? Because if they're not, you're piecemealing this, presenting it to us and calling it restorative practices, which is not right and it's not fair for the outcome that I hope you're trying to achieve.
I understand what you're saying. And I'll start with the first question you asked, and I'll go succinctly from there. BEST is a framework. That framework, with BEST, we look at best practices. One of the practices that we are addressing in our tiered system of support is restorative practices. In the past, we have been providing, the behavior intervention specialists have been providing professional development for the schools that they have been in, as well as they have been providing other professional development. As we, and Mr. Shad has asked this question before about BEST, why BEST isn't in every school. We're in the process now, being that it's a multi-tiered system of support, something that we have to do both academically as well as behaviorally. We are rolling that out this year. We are looking, as we move forward with that philosophy, the schools that we're going to roll that out. Everybody will not start at the same time. Some of them, since they've already been with using that framework with BEST, we're going to continue with that. We're going to also work with the other schools and the behavior intervention specialists. Their roles are changing more at the district level, working with schools, just like you said, working with the principals, working with the administrative staff, and developing these BAT teams that can go ahead and work with the teachers too. And they'll work with the teachers, which they have been doing. They'll continue to do that, but work with them to go ahead and, because as you know, as a trainer, restorative practices is a shifting mindset. So we are working to do that as we roll this out. We rolled it out to the schools that we've been working with, but again, as we ask the question, and matter of fact, Dr. Elkin Johnson, you asked a question about a hearing officer. This is another way to get interventions in there, and with that philosophy, being a restorative mindset, building relationships and mending them, we are going to go ahead and provide professional development for the schools as well as the teachers in the school to be able to do that. Because just like you said, it is not right to do it piecemeal. Restorative practices does not work that way. So.
Okay, so back to my question. I saw Condor using restorative practices. So my question is, what I saw up there, meaning that the principal, their admin staff, and their teachers have been trained. Am I correct?
Right. Our behavior intervention specialists have gone in there and worked with them in training at that school. Yes.
Okay, so let me make sure. Okay, so you're saying your behavior interventionists have gone in to work with them. My question is, have they trained them in restorative practices, and are they trainers? Because there's a difference with going to a conference, learning information, and then going back to your school saying, we are this. If you have not gone through that 2-day training, You are not trained. And then also, does every faculty and staff member have the 2 books that go along with training? Because again, it's not effective if you go to the training and you don't have the material that you can take back to your school and that you can utilize not only with your faculty and staff, but with the students. So again, my question is, we showcase Condor. So Condor principal, her admin team, and all of the faculty and staff at that school is trained in restorative practices.
They have had training, they have had the training in restorative practice.
The entire faculty and staff.
The entire faculty and staff, I've got to ask my behavior interventions to help me with that piece.
Hey, how are you?
Good. So there are 3 people who were trained in restorative practices at Condor Elementary, a school counselor, the behavior interventionist, and an administrator. And there is one person that is an actual trainer at Condor. And they have been doing some PDs there with that trainer there at Condor.
Okay, I'm going to talk with Dr. Davis later, because I think when we come up here and we showcase things, that we need to be clear on what we're putting out there. Because what I saw was that we're a restorative practices school. And with the people that you just indicated, that's not a restorative practices school. That's going to a workshop, getting some information, going back to your school, and now saying that's what you are. No, we need to revamp that quickly.
Yes, ma'am. Restorative
and not you per se,
yes,
I'm saying overall.
Yes, ma'am. Restorative practices is a part of BEST, and so is actually one of the PDs. We don't necessarily go under the umbrella of IRP, but we do parts of the training like circles. But there is one person there that is a trainer. She has been trained. I think there's 7 people in our district now there's 12 people who are trainers, and she is one of them. So she is going through the trainings with Condor as a whole.
Okay, I would like to see that, because we have to be careful. It's almost like copyright.
Yes, ma'am.
You can't just go to a workshop, get their information, and just bring it back to your school or your district and say, that's what we are. So we need to talk about that. Thank you.
Additional questions or concerns from board members? Dr. Holmes?
I might just like to make a comment. Restorative practice or BEST or whatever you all are calling it, since we've had some clarity from Dr. Elkins, I would just like to say I'm glad that you all have implemented that in the school. I'd like to see that start in the high school a little faster, because that's where we seem to be having the issues of students going from the pipeline to the prison pipeline, and that's where we need to make sure that we have those interventions in place, because those kids, by the time they're in high school, have the various social emotional issues that cause them to react in those various ways. And a program like this is best for them also. So elementary is good, but we've got to implement this in the high school, where we have all of these students that we look at several cases, and it makes no sense that a child in high school should have several criminal charges against them. That's a problem. We're a school. We're not a school to prison pipeline institute, and we shouldn't be that. And before it gets to that point, there should be these interventions in place, because we have to be careful about placing all of these criminal charges on young children and then saying we're trying to help them succeed to the next level. That's not true. So I'd like to see us push this a little faster, or at least experiment in the high school, one of the high schools that may be having more issues than others, because this is a valuable practice. Because as we know, perception is reality. A lot of times some cases could be avoided if the perception was seen as differently than what it actually is, or the intervention was there in the first place. But I applaud you on that. I think y'all are doing a wonderful job with that, but we must go ahead and start moving that into the high school level. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes. Mr. Manning? Ms. Agostini?
My question, it might be directed more toward the board chair, but are we having at our board retreat this summer, the discipline workshop? Is that on the agenda?
Not at this time.
Okay, well, I would like to request, again, we've had it canceled a couple of times, that we get the discipline workshop put, if we could get one scheduled in the next quarter or so. This was nice, it was on the surface, but I think we need more information, breaking it down by schools. And I've got questions about, what's the most common in-school suspension in middle school? And then the same for out-of-school suspension and what we're doing to address those issues. So I would love a workshop so we can really talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly and figure out what are our real problems, why are they being caused, and what are we doing about them? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Agostini. And to address that, we absolutely did schedule workshops, but when you don't have the majority of the board able or willing to attend the workshop, it had to be rescheduled. So I do appreciate your estimate. That is something that I hear your request, but we did have it scheduled, and we'll move forward to reschedule it again.
We were given 2 weeks notification for the second scheduling. The first one was scheduled because of an executive meeting an emergency meeting due to ethics violations of board members, and that's why it was canceled. Thank you.
That's not why it was canceled, but thank you so much for your opinion, Ms. Agostini. Duly noted. Next question, Mr. Banning.
Yeah, so I think that this is a great effort. I'm very supportive of the BEST model and the work that we're doing. I think restorative practices is important. I do caution us as a board when we continue to say, I want to make this a priority and that a priority, because we had cultural competency, we've got the BEST program, students have lesson plans, teachers have to be up to date on their curriculum, what they have to teach, depending on the number of planning sessions that they have. We're just stacking a lot, and we keep saying teachers need to. They have to be, and now we require them to have some, I think, mental health or behavioral sort of training that they have to go through the state. We want them to teach them how to, at some point, it's just a lot. So I just want to be a little bit cautious as a board about how we prioritize and what we put on staff, because we're asking them to do more and more and more. And I know, Dr. Davis, you continually look at the priorities and how we fold all this in. But I just want to be careful that we don't continue to say everything that's great in front of us at this time is a priority, and then we just keep stacking those priorities, and it's just difficult. There's only so much one person can learn and change the way that they do. And it's always the teacher. It's just a lot. So that's my only comment.
Thank you, Mr. Manning. Additional questions or comments from board members? Dr. Davis.
We have listened. I've listened to the board comments regarding the discipline program. We are fully aware as administration that we have more work to do as it relates to our discipline in our school district. We've talked extensively with our teachers and heard from them from FAC. We've heard from our school administrators about issues of discipline that have taken place in our schools. We've attempted, one of the first things that we attempted to do for you all tonight is, one, to provide you with a discipline philosophy. We have not had a discipline philosophy, so the discipline philosophy should structure how we address things. We have slated also classroom management for our teachers to assist them with that. And so we will continue to try to prioritize those things for the board and for our teachers to ensure that, at the same time, without overburdening the teachers with the initial trainings. There's also some concern that has been shared as well about the number of professional development and the amount of training, the amount of workshops that our teachers are required to attend. And so finding the appropriate balance, I think all requests are legitimate requests and concerns. And so this administration will continue to address and make sure that we can expedite getting our teachers trained in the BEST framework, in the MTSS framework, in the restorative justice or restorative practice framework, whichever one we decide to focus on. We'll come back and provide you with an update on the direction we're going to go that will allow us to add a more expeditious way of getting the mass majority of our teachers and administrators prepared to deal with some of the issues that our students are bringing to the table table. BEST is just one of those things. We've attempted to try to address those things when it comes to the social emotional learning of our students. We've attempted to address ACEs for our students. We've attempted to address poverty for our students. There's a lot of training through cultural relevant pedagogy. One of the that was why the budget priority sheet was very important for us, to get some indication of where we should be focusing our emphasis and time and our budget on helping continue to move our district forward. But we take those recommendations to heart and serious, and we will make sure that we provide you all with an updated information regarding that at a later date. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. And one of the things that we did ask for was a District 2 discipline philosophy. You have provided that. We appreciate that. I know there's always work to be done. Where children are concerned, you're never going to be exactly where you want to be. You keep, and once you reach that point, you keep on pushing the envelope to increase your goals. But we did ask for a philosophy, and for that, having provided that, I want to acknowledge that you did do what we asked you to do, and we appreciate that. Additional questions or comments from board members? Mr. Shad.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Shad.
In the interest of time, I won't labor you, Mr. Smith, with all the questions that I have. As I've already said before this meeting, I look forward to Dr. Davis, myself, and whomever, and you, Mr. Smith, to having a robust conversation, have a deeper dive into what you've shown us in this presentation. But just so you all will know, I'm looking for, my expectation is to find out if we have fidelity with the BEST program, where we are in terms of implementation, whether there's a rush versus we're moving progressively to the goal. And it almost sounds like BEST is really just one option, not actually what we've tied ourselves into, yet it's part of our philosophy. But I did want to just ask this, I think this one question. I see draft at the top of this philosophy. So is this already in place, or is this just a draft, but it's really not it's not the philosophy that we've adopted?
This is a draft. The committee came together, and that was this is what we came up with, and it's in draft form. I wanted, before it came out of draft form or whatever, I wanted to go ahead and make sure I presented it to you this evening. But right now, that's why you see draft across there, because it had not been presented to you at this time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And the second question that I'll have, and then I'm done for this meeting. I tell you, I would have liked to see, unless I missed it, a table which shows the number of recommendations for expulsions, at least for this third quarter, because I know you're doing a comparison from 17-18 for the third quarter, but at least see the recommendations for expulsions. You gave me the expulsions, 30 versus 21, yes, but I'd like to have seen what the recommendations were during that period, especially in light of the budget request for an additional hearing officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shad. Additional questions or concerns from board members? If not, thank you, Mr. Smith.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on in our agenda to item 14, agenda items for the next meeting, agenda items for the May 28th, 2019 board meeting. Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as a reminder, there's a special call board meeting scheduled for May 20th. We will have a public hearing on the budget. At that time, we will bring before you the second reading for the budget, and it will have, as I shared with Dr. Elkins Johnson, traditionally in the second budget presentation, we present that budget with the different increments of millage increase. So we'll bring that before you in that form for the board's consideration. We'll have the approval of the policy revisions that we cover this evening, minus the one that we pulled aside for ours to take to FAC for consideration. For the May 28th board meeting, we will have student appeals, adult ed requests, special education, special recognitions, a legislative update. We'll do proposals for policy revisions to GCG, part-time and substitute professional staff employment, GCI, professional staff development, GCKA, support staff reduction in force, pro rata reduction in salary and on weekdays, GCMD instructional staff extra days, GCNC supervision of instructional staff, and GCO the evaluation of administrative staff. To also include in that board meeting an update on leadership development across the district, as well as an update on capital improvement.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Moving on.
You can ask for.
Yes, hold just a minute.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Agostini. Is there a motion with regard to item 14.1, agenda items for the May 28th, 2019 board meeting as presented by Dr. Davis?
Madam Chair, I think he was
15.1.
suggesting
I'm sorry,
them. Are we at
15.1.
don't we ask for suggestions for future items to be included?
Are there, we can do that. We can do that. I think we have forms that we'd ask for board members
Correct.
to complete, to share that for the process. Is there a
Madam Chair.
motion? Yes, Mr. Shad.
I move that we approve the agenda items for May 28, 2019, which includes the removal of the
GCR.
GCR.
Until the faculty advisory.
Yes,
Is there a second?
pending the faculty advising council, faculty advisor council meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Shad. Is there a second? Thank you, Dr. Caution Parker. It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion?
Madam Chair?
Mrs. Agostini.
And I'm sorry, I thought that on item agenda 14.1, that's when the board was allowed input into future agenda items. But I would like for us to consider a cell phone tower update for our future agenda and also for our next board meeting. I would like to request that our bond attorney come to discuss the recommended changes by the superintendent to the standard signature and no litigation certificate that the board was not briefed on as it pertains to the board chair's ethics violations and fines.
Additional requests from board members? If not, board members, there's the motion on the table. Without questions, future questions or comments, we will call the question at this time.
To approve the agenda for May 28th with the removal of it. Okay.
I don't blame him. Have all members wishing to vote voted? Dr. Caution Parker?
Did you vote?
By a vote of 7-0, the motion unanimously carries. At this time, we're at item 16, specifically 16.1, public participation. This is the second opportunity. Mr. Nuzum, I believe, had stepped out of the room earlier. He has probably left now. If he is still here, you're welcome to speak. If not, we will move on. Having no response, we'll move on to item 17, specifically 17.1, board and superintendent comments. Mrs. Agostini.
Thank you. Over spring break, my husband and I started our last set of college tours with our youngest child, Caroline. At the beginning of one of the informational presentations, the admissions officer started by saying, "Our mission and vision are the heartbeat of everything we do on campus." That got me thinking, as a board, are we talking the talk? We are talking the talk, but are we walking the walk? I look at how we are inconsistently conducting our public participation sessions. We want to strictly adhere to policy one week, and another week we allow latitude. A board officer cannot be removed for cause, revisions proposed and voted down in policy BD because for cause is considered too broad. Yet, the board approves policy GBEB on April 9th with the list for employee staff conduct, which is not exhaustive. As the missions officer continued, she emphasized to students the importance of proofreading their college application essays. Yet as a board, we're encouraged to push through policy, focusing on content and not worrying about the spelling words and typos. And in fact, tonight in a first reading in policy GBEEA, pertaining to social media and employees are encouraged to follow writing conventions when contributing to online content, including the use of proper grammar, capitalization, and punctuation. Finally, at our last meeting, the board passed policy GBE. Included in the list of staff responsibilities is, quote, diligence in submitting required reports and assignments promptly at the times specified, unquote. Yet once again, we've heard from the media last week of another missed deadline for campaign disclosure reports after assured in January that it wouldn't happen again. When do we start walking the walk and holding ourselves to the same standards we are putting into policy for others? Thank you.
Mr. Shad.
Thank you. Y'all have a good evening.
Dr. Elkins Johnson.
Good night, everyone.
Dr. Caution Parker.
I do have something to say, but I'm not going to say it, but it's on the tip of my tongue. I'm sure a lot of you out there know what I want to say. But anyway, have a good evening.
Mr. Manning.
I started my morning at 4:30 this morning. I'm done. So y'all have a great evening.
Dr. Holmes.
I'd like to say thank you, everybody, for a great meeting and have a wonderful evening. It's late.
Dr. Davis. Take your time, Dr. Davis. Make your comments, Dr. Davis.
What goes around comes around, right? I just want to take an opportunity to say to all of our mothers in the district, I know it's after Mother's Day, but I hope that you all had a very wonderful Mother's Day celebration. Mothers are very important to us in Richland School District 2, and we want to show our gratitude to you all. I had an opportunity to reflect over Mother's Day as my mother visited with me, and realized that was the first or the second time in my life that I did not have the mother figure that raised me, which was my grandmother. But I reflected on a lot of the lessons that my grandmother imparted to me. A very strong-willed, quiet, powerful lady. As I began to reflect on my awesome responsibility of leading this district, I often lean on some of the words that she shared with me, and I started doing some searching, and I saw this quote that just reminded me of what my purpose is. And it said that in difficult situations in dealing with others, I've found that my attitude is more important than the facts. If I maintain the right attitude, I can better deal with the facts. A wrong attitude or motive can cause me to miss the plan that God has for me. Furthermore, a wrong attitude can damage my relationships with others. So I will continue to try to have and hold myself accountable by having the right attitude, even when dealing with those who attempt to pull me into situations, to attempt to mud my name, attempt to poke holes at my leadership for whatever various reasons that may exist. My attitude must remain premier because there are 28,500 students that depend on a superintendent with a premier attitude. There are nearly 4,000 teachers and employees in our district that depend on a premier attitude and a premier approach. Each day will not get easier, but each day is a new day and an opportunity for me to learn as the leader of this wonderful school district. And so I thank all of you who show support to our teachers, all of you who show support to our students, all of you who show support to our board and to our community and are unwavering in that support. We all have one mission and one vision in this district, and that's to ensure that our students are prepared to be global citizens of tomorrow, citizens prepared to lead and excel. And we want to ensure that we can identify the gifts and talents that all of our students are blessed with and give them a platform to do that. We must stay focused on the mission and the vision of the school district at all times, Whether we disagree or agree, we can agree that that mission and vision is important. Richland Northeast High School Convergence Media Magnet Director, A.J. Chambers, is the 2019-2020 Richland 2 Teacher of the Year. The honor was announced during the recent annual Teacher of the Year banquet held at R2I2. In the 3 years since he joined the Richland 2 family, Chambers has guided and mentored his journalism students to amazing heights. He has built national recognized programs at 2 high schools. He's recognized as one of the top scholastic broadcast advisors in the country and has recently earned the title of Advisor of the Year by the South Carolina Scholastic Press Association. This year, our district also honored an outstanding new teacher as the Rookie Teacher of the Year. The Lake Carolina Elementary Lore music teacher, Julia Beck, is the 2019-2020 Rookie Teacher of the Year. The award is sponsored by H&R Block and goes to an outstanding teacher in his or her first year in education. For those of you who don't know, I'm sure you all do, graduations are less than a month away. Ridgeview and Spring Valley High School seniors will graduate Wednesday, June 5th, followed by Westwood, Richland Northeast, and Blythewood High School on Thursday, June 6th. We have over 1,900 seniors prepared to receive their diplomas. Commencement for W.R. Rogers Center graduates on June 4th. If you're going to an 8 o'clock graduation, I encourage you to get there early. Downtown traffic is fierce in the morning for those of us that matriculate in the Northeast on a regular basis. And the R2I2 Speaker Series continues on May 30th with Dorothy Benton Frank. She will be here signing her new book, appropriately titled Queen Bee. And I don't think she's related to Beyonce.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Before I share comments, let me ask board members, do we need to convene into the second executive session to finish the conversation that was not had earlier?
No.
It appears to be the will of the board that that is not the case. And I want to share something tonight. I have a bevy of comments to share, but in the respect of your time, I won't do so, and I won't dignify certain accusations tonight that haven't been asked of others. Dr. Davis, your comments were very convicting with regard to having a premier and a positive attitude. That's something that you show. You don't just say. It shows about being positive and supportive to our staff members, supportive to our superintendent, supportive to our teachers. At the Richland 2 Teacher of the Year celebration last week, Dr. Davis took the time to thank his executive staff, assistant superintendents, support staff, teachers, students, and he took great detail. I thanked the communications department. He went into great detail to thank everyone in the room and everyone in the district who makes this district work except himself. I asked if I could get up and include him, and I was told that he was the closer, so I'm doing it here. I want to thank the people in this room and our superintendent who make this district work. I want to thank Dr. Davis for not being premier, but phenomenal, for leading a phenomenal school district. Phenomenal students, phenomenal teachers, phenomenal administrators, phenomenal executive staff, custodial and support service staff, resource officers, cafeteria workers, all of the people that make our district phenomenal. And it starts with our leadership and our superintendent. And I appreciate you, and I'm sure I don't stand alone. I'm sure that the majority of this board does indeed support you, Dr. Davis. I know I don't stand alone in the support of the people who make our district work. The people who are here tonight because you got to be, not because you want to be. And there are some people who want to be. And I thank you and I appreciate you. The hour is late, but we do appreciate the time that you take to sit here. I can remember when I used to be on the other side of this table and come to board meetings because I wanted to learn more, because I wanted to hear about policies. I wanted to hear about celebrations and stories of success in our district. And I enjoy that. I enjoy the positive atmosphere. I enjoy that there was no backbiting, that there were no personal attacks, no personal antics. I enjoyed that. I appreciated that. And for the people who are there tonight, who are supportive of our district, I made a list of the things that Dr. Davis and that the district has done, administrators of the year. And there are too many pages. I'm up to about 3 pages of the accolades of our district and the things and successes that we've undergone at your leadership. And it's just too much to mention tonight because the hour is late, but I want to not take for granted the people who focus on why we are here. We are here for students. We are here for teachers. We are here for administrators. We are here for the community that rallies together. That's a lot of work. A lot of work goes into the planning department, and people that come here and make these presentations, it doesn't go unseen. They take time of their own to come here and do that. We appreciate that. A lot goes on to what makes this district phenomenal and for us having phenomenal leadership. You can't pick and choose who's acceptable to hurt and who's not. At a board meeting or any school facility, no one should be hurt. No one should be injured. No one should be castigated. No one should be called out. You can't pick and choose who's hurt and who's not. No one should be. I'm excited to honor Mr. Andrew Chambers, Richland II Teacher of the Year, who's shown nothing but excitement, humility, and eagerness as he assumes the role that Sue Weems so graciously fulfilled. There were 5 finalists: Agnes Knox, Jennifer Bull, Clarice Nance, and Missy Paschal. My hats, and I know I mispronounced Missy Paschal, and I apologize if I mispronounced her name. My hats go off to all of them, as well as each teacher who was a Teacher of the Year in his or her own individual right. Teachers show up for work every day. On May 1st, teachers from around the state showed up at the State House to make their voices heard. Advocacy is everything, and I am thankful that we have such impassioned givers of themselves in our district. Teachers give of themselves. I don't care how much we pay them. They give of themselves. They take their work home at night. They work over the summer. Their hours are not set in stone from 7:30 to 2:45 or to 3. Teachers give of themselves, and I'm thankful for them. Long before May 1st, teachers showed up for work every day and give the very best of themselves to the very best that parents send to school. For those teachers and for your sacrifice of love, I salute you today, tomorrow, May 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 30th, and every day that we sit here as board members trying our very best to enact policies that will support you as you raise the next generation of our future. Bless you. I will strike all of that in the effort of you being premier and positive. I thank you all who are continuing to focus on policies that affect our district, and by doing so, honoring the 26,000 plus voters who sent me here for my 5th year of service. Aside from personal attacks, I'm thankful to be here. I like what I do. I love our kids. I love our babies. I love our teachers. And I thank you, Dr. Davis, for all that you endure on our behalf, for the phenomenal leadership that you give us. I appreciate it. This is what we've been sent here to do and what I'll continue to do in every fiber of my being. And I know that the majority of the board feels the same way. The majority of the people in this room feel the same. God bless each and every one of you. Have a phenomenal evening. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn the meeting for May 14, 2019.
Is there any discussion? Meeting adjourned. Have a phenomenal evening.